Tonight, Aquaman fights the common masculine urge to take on a gorilla in hand-to-hand combat. Superman experiences the explosion of Krypton 2, Electric Boogaloo. And Secret Origins gives the long-awaited epilogue to Ann Nocenti's Katana series, thus proving there is nobody in editorial. All that and more tonight on the Not-So-New 52. Hello everyone and welcome to episode 137 of the Not So New 52. I am your host and Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, good Tuesday to you all. It is the holiday season as I not only record this because I am very late in getting this recording done, but also release it. It's Christmas Eve. Why are you listening to this show? I mean, I'm grateful, but do something, you know? I'm doing this because I'm contractually obligated. What are you doing this for? Anyway, I don't really have a whole lot that I want to say here. Holiday season, I spent years getting the entire New 52 list built up, and all of my Christmases were just buy it off the list and trying to convince my family members, no, you can't just buy random books because odds are I'll either already have it or it won't be one I need. Please stick to the approved ISBNs and buy those books specifically. They were not happy with me for a good 4 years there, but I made it work. Anyway, all that said, one thing I do want to say before we get into this episode is I'm breaking the rules of the show. Now, I've broken the rules of the show in the past in terms of I've reached ahead and done books from future weeks just because I wanted to fill it out a little bit, but I have never had to delay books to a later week. I could not do that this week. So I've been saying this for the past 2 episodes, but what happened was DC did not want to put out any books on December 31st for whatever reason, probably money. And so they cramped them all into this week's releases, December 24th. As such, if I were to do all of the books in this week's releases, it would be 23 books. I am not going to do 23 books in one episode. I would sooner kill myself than do 23 books in one episode. So, what I decided to do was looking at last month's books, next month's books, trying to use some algorithms and figure out how I should rearrange things, and then ultimately just going with my gut because that felt better. I have pushed a bunch of books from this week into next week's episode, so that one is not just 3 books, as it would have only been the 3 weekly books if I had left it as was. So, what was 23 and 3 will now be 14 and 12. You're welcome. But that is neither here nor there because ultimately it is just on me to say I am not doing this technically exactly 10 years after the fact. And if you would like to publicly shame me, the comments are down below. I will love every single comment that says, you suck. Please don't do that, because I'm going to forget I said that, and I'm going to be very hurt after a comment says that. Anyway, coming up this episode after that long and rambling opening, we have, in alphabetical order here, Aquaman, Arkham Manor, Batman Eternal, Deathstroke, Earth 2 World's End, Flash, Gotham by Midnight, Infinity Man, Justice League Dark, Future's End, Red Lanterns, Secret Origins, G.I. Zombie, and Superman. Out of that, obviously we have the Green Lantern event, which is in Red Lanterns, and strangely enough, also Infinity Man is tying into that storyline. I could not begin to tell you why, but everything else is just its own little stuff. Nothing really event-wise going on. So, Merry Christmas to all. Let's start the first book. Red Lanterns number 37, written by Charles Soule, art by Jim Calafiore. This is the next part of Godhead, and in the previous part, which was New Guardians, Kyle and Carol are on New Genesis, depowered, along with John Stewart, Saint Walker, And I think that's it. So this issue picks up with Simon and Guy, who are inside of a miracle cell, which is apparently an indestructible cube that is also trapped inside of a high energy field. And it would definitely kill them in like a second, even if they got out of the cube. And we hear Guy's inner monologue the entire time. He's basically just pumping himself up, getting more upset and angry. He's saying like, yeah, the world sucks. And I learned that when I was a cop. And then people started dying around me. And that also I learned by being a Red Lantern, so everything's awful all the time. And he tells Simon he's getting angry, and Simon's like, hey man, maybe just like calm down and we'll think this through, what on. He's like, nope, here's what's gonna happen. I'm gonna blast my way out of this cell, and then you're gonna throw up a shield, the best damn shield you've ever made, and you're gonna defend yourself from it. Don't worry about me. And Simon's like, please don't do the self-sacrifice thing. But it's too late. He says, I'll always be the bad guy, and he blows up the miracle cell. Immediately, the high-energy stuff starts sweeping in. It attacks Guy. Simon throws up a shield around both of them. It starts cracking, and it shatters. And they are both almost incinerated by all this energy. But luckily, it stops. All the energy just stops, and they fall to the ground. And we see a new god come up saying, you guys are idiots. You can't escape from a miracle cell. It's impossible. And it turns out that it's Malhedron. And another thing that's been going on is that Malhedron, despite the fact that he's the one who's been fighting against Guy and Simon each time we have him appear, he recently went up against Highfather and said, no, I don't like your plan. So he's now on the run as well. But Guy and Simon don't know this. They're ready to square up against Malhedron. He's like, hey, Guy, look, I'm not on Highfather's side anymore. I don't like what he's doing, and I just like turned off the high energy field. So yeah, I'm on your guys' side now. But if we were to fight, I would obviously win again. And so at that point, Simon and Guy are like, okay, so what are we doing then? And Malhedron explains there are other ring bearers on the planet. They are going to be able to help you out. I will help you like try to get to them, but there's something else you need to know. And Guy's like, nah, screw that. I'm going to deal with the ring bearers. And he's like, hold on, look, I want you to at least hear me out on this, okay? Your rings, all of the rings that were brought together, they are going to be at like what you need to take him out at bare minimum here. So there is all the different colors there, including a blue one. And that's where Guy perks up. He's like, blue, that could actually be super useful here. And he's like, yep, totally. However, they are under the control of Hyalt, who is the armorer of New Genesis, and he's just tinkering around with them, trying to figure out what's up. But he is like a one-man army corps. He is absolutely going to be able to destroy you guys. And so he leads them over to where Hyalt's workshop is, and Simon's like, okay, so you're going to come in, you're going to help us out? And he's like, no, I'm on the run. This is my last little thing I'm doing before I'm out. Peace. And he just walks off. And so Guy's like, okay, I'm going to walk in there. I'm going to be a distraction. Simon, you do what you can to grab it. And as Guy turns to look at Simon, Simon's already like floating his way over there. He's like, what the hell are you doing? He's like, same thing you doing. What's all this self-sacrifice stuff, man? You did it when we were down on that beach. You did it when we were fighting the new gods. You just did it again in the Miracle Zone. You're about to do it again, like right now. This is crazy, okay? Stop trying to kill yourself. So Simon busts open the wall. Hyalt's like already just there with a sword and a gun in his hands. And Simon's like, look, you're going to have to fight because otherwise we're both going to die. So we see Hyalt's ready for the attack. Simon comes in. He starts making constructs of swords. Meanwhile, Guy goes in past him, gets out the rings as fast as he can. But in doing so, a robot gets triggered that starts blasting him away. And he manages to get his hands on the rings containment field, of which there's like 3 or 4 Red Lantern rings inside. He's like, awesome. So he slaps it on. He now gets a supercharge, blasts through the robot that's blocking everything. Meanwhile, Hyalt is fighting up against Simon. He's just like, oh, you know, you guys keep on using the rings as weapons, but like, did you ever consider they could be used for so much more than that? Like, the blue ring causes hope. What if you mix together the hope energy along with like a general crowd dispersal thing, you know, to pacify a population whenever we're coming in? It could be really useful. And Simon's like, shut up, man, I don't care about that. So Hyalt's got Simon at sword point. Looks like he's about to kill him. And then in comes a big bunch of red vomit from Guy, and that manages to get Hyalt down on the ground. And Simon's like, okay, let's get out of here. You got the rings, let's go. And he's like, hold on, we need a cleaner escape. I got an idea. And he tells Simon to make a football, but leaves the tip open, and then we have Guy deposit more of that red goop like energy into it, and Simon's like, but it's just going to eat away at each other, and in a few seconds it's going to become a grenade. Oh, okay, I get it. And so they toss the football in front of Hjalt, it explodes, and he's like, all right, well, that was just mildly obnoxious. Well, you think that would actually impact me and all of my armor or whatnot? And we see that they're holding like dozens of footballs in their arms, and it's like, nah, but we think it's going to mess with your stuff. And they throw them all into his workshop, and he's like, oh god, no, my stuff. And he runs back in to deal with it, and Simon's like, that's genius, man, super smart. So Guy holds out the rings that he got, and the Star Sapphire one just bolts. It's like, subject found, let's go. And it's just like, all right, well, that one is not of use anymore, but the rest of these rings we can do something with. But we got to find Saint Walker, and we got to get this blue ring on him. And Simon once again says, hey, look, you may think that it's because of you that all these people are dying around you. That's why you're doing the self-sacrifice stuff, but it's not. When you fight, people live, okay? Can you believe that for me? He's like, all right, yeah, fine, cool. Let's go kick some ass. So, final page, we get Saint Walker, John Stewart, Kyle Rayner, and Carol Ferris, and they were just obliterated by Highfather, but it turns out they weren't. They were teleported to somewhere else on New Genesis. And the Guardians teleport in as well. And they're like, hey, Guardians, did you get teleported by Highfather? It's like, nah, we were doing our own thing like 2 issues ago. Don't worry about it. And so Kyle apologizes for not listening now the White Lantern ring is lost. And the Guardians say, okay, here's the thing. We have an idea. There's no chance that we will succeed in, like, okay, there's a small chance, almost no chance. But we can't do it. It's going to rely on you. All of you, meaning all the different colored cores and whatnot. So, obviously building up to that. It's good. It's fine. It definitely feels like, and this has been consistent over Red Lanterns and all of the Green Lantern books, it feels like an afterthought. It feels like, okay, we have to work the Red Lanterns in somehow, and this is just where they're at right now. Everything that happened in this book, which is essentially just the rings are freed, could have happened in any other book. It could have been anybody else. It could have just been the rings started moving on their own for all I care. Like, this doesn't accomplish that much. It's just more of a continuation of Guy's story of like, yeah, he feels guilty over all the Red Lanterns that died, and we're continuing on that. But event-wise, not really that necessary. So overall, I'd say this one is probably going to be I'll give it a 7. Just a flat 7. I think if it was a little bit more integrated in the event, it could have gone a little higher, but it's a fine enough issue for what it is. Infinity Man and the Forever People #6, written by Dan DiDio and Keith Giffen, art by Tom Grummett and Daniel HDR. This is somehow a tie-in to Godhead, like officially. So last issue, Guy Gardner attacked I'm always blinking. Infinity Man and the Forever People. That's it, Forever People. Because they're new gods, and the whole thing with Godhead is that he's anti-new god now. And it ended with them all blast apart, and the new gods in this come up, and they are moving towards their mother box. It's calling for them. And the Green Lanterns are like, hey, step away from the mother box. Seriously, stop doing that. And Guy Gardner's like, no, seriously, I get away from that. But they all reach forward, and they all touch the mother box, and they explode and become Infinity Man. And Guy Gardner's like, Jesus, you've got to be kidding me. How many of this is there? And he's like, hello, I'm Infinity Man. Please let me help you. And he's like, oh, lanterns are being hunted by you new gods. Is that you helping? And he's like, I'm not really a part of that, but you got to let your rage out, buddy. It's really hurting you from the inside. He's like, oh, I'll let it out. And he spews out his Red Lantern napalm puke or whatever. Infinity Man freezes it in midair, and he's like, maybe I can figure out what's wrong with you with this. And he reforms it into the shape of Guy Gardner and says like, oh, you have hatred and self-loathing. That's what you got to be free of. And Guy Gardner's like, that's who I am underneath it all, baby. You can't get rid of that. And he's like, fair enough. So he blasts the viscous form back into Guy Gardner's face, taking him out of the fight. The Green Lanterns see this and are like, okay, clearly we're a bit outmatched here. Time for Plan Omega or whatever. And so the three lanterns construct, respectively, the legs, the chest, and the head of a mech out of constructs. And this mech is a giant mecha Darkseid. And Infinity Man looks at this and he's like, if that was meant to scare me, it didn't work. And he just grows. He just scales himself up to match in fighting side. And he's like, nothing is going to keep me from getting to New Genesis and to Highfather. So Guy wakes up. He's like, oh, this is BS. And he jumps up and Bidge, the chipmunk Green Lantern, is driving the head. So Guy just punches his way into the driver's seat and takes control. So they start fighting. They're literally doing a Power Rangers thing where they're crashing into buildings. We see an airplane is flying by, and he's like, the guy's like a new pilot, like learning how to fly, and he's like, oh my god, a big green monster. And they make a joke about how the guy was asking him where he's from, and it's like, oh, you mean Boston? You know, that's a thing. And they're like, no, look, a big green monster. So the plane literally falls out of the sky, and nobody saves it. So they're dead. Bidge is like, stop, you're putting innocents at risk, Guy. And he's like, oh, I'm not letting him walk away from this. And so Infinity Man throws a few punches, and he's like, oh, this battle is futile. It is a waste of our energies. It must stop. So Infinity Man blasts Mecha Darkseid across an interstate, killing more countless civilians, crashes him into a building. And as the building is hit, a bunch of rocks start falling onto civilians, and one woman in particular is under the rubble. And a man comes in, who we've never met before, and he's like, oh, it's coming down. I've got to get you away from here. And he pushes the woman out of the way, and he himself gets hit by a few rocks that knock him out. So Mecha Darkseid is knocked on its ass. It disintegrates. The constructs are broken. And Guy crawls his way out of the rubble, and he's like, oh, Infinity Man, you're going to be sorry you ever met me. And Infinity Man's just standing there, and he just taps Guy on the forehead and says, sleep. And Guy goes to sleep. And Infinity Man says, you're not the reason I am brought here, Infinity Man was brought out. I'm here for that guy. Pointing to the dude who pushed the woman out of the way of the rubble. Turns out, as we've seen in Future's End of all things, this is King Faraday. And he says, our paths are intrinsically linked, but not quite yet. It will be in the distant future. And Infinity Man reaches out to King Faraday and says, I'm Infinity Man, let me help you, King Faraday. But it goes black and we don't see what happens. Cut to sometime later, we're at a coffee shop. Guy's gone off to do the rest of the Godhead storyline. Bidge is here in a trench coat construct, talking to the Forever people, saying like, hey, look, this isn't about Highfather. It's about your connection with Infinity Man and your connection to him. And the new guys are like, look, we don't remember anything when we become Infinity Man. It's all just a blur. We just black out. And he's like, all right, well, that's concerning. But if you guys ever need help, give me a call. So Bidge leaves, and then they all sit around the table, and they're like, yeah, we had to lie to him. We actually remember everything that happens when we're Infinity Man. Not only that, we also can share in each other's thoughts. We all know what each other is thinking and feeling, and that's messed up. I don't like doing that. That feels wrong to me. And then Big Bear chimes up and he's like, oh, we got an even bigger problem. Infinity Man wants to get to New Genesis. It wants to get to Highfather. And if Infinity Man wants to get there, then if we ever want to be free of them, we have to kill Highfather. Dun, dun, dun. I don't get how they got to that point. That one didn't make any sense to me, but yeah, okay. There you go. Tie into Godhead by whatever reason. I don't know what's happening. We got 2 issues left in this book. I have no goddamn idea what's happening. Yeah, it's a mess. It's a mess is what it is. This is absolutely... Look, if you in your 9-issue series are going to stop and smell the roses with an event book that this one's a tie-in and the last one isn't, despite the fact the last one should have been too, then like, what are you doing with your time here? You know, why are you doing this? I don't understand what the point of this book is. I don't even know where we're going with it, but it just feels so superfluous. I know that Dan DiDio has such a thing for the creations of Jack Kirby, and he really wants to make this work, but like, it's just not. So all in all, I got to give this one like 5.5. It's just, there's 1 or 2 like okay moments in it, but it's just shrouded by this mystery of I don't know what the hell is going on, and I don't feel like you're going to explain. Arkham Manor number 3, written by Gerry, Duggan, art by Shawn Crystal. So last issue we had Bruce witness a inmate named Seth being killed by who he thinks is Victor Zsasz, but he ultimately gets his ass handed to him and the person manages to get away. So this issue picks up with him being checked out by one of the medical professionals. He's got a concussion. He gets up, he stumbles around a little bit, and he's like, "Bro, you've got a concussion. You need to sit down." And it's obvious that he's like faking it just a little bit. So as he manages to knock out the medical professional, he steals his outfit and manages to sneak off the keys from whoever the Arkham in charge is. I can never remember his name. And we see that they're calling for Detective Bullock because of all the stuff that happened. It's just like, yeah, this is an issue and whatnot, but we need to take care of it. So we see that Seth is being wheeled outside because they do have an ambulance on standby, and they got to get him out of the place. So we follow Bruce as he goes up into Seth's room, investigates for more clues and what's not, and he manages to come across that there is a wall that was fake or like put up specifically for the inmate's sake. It's hard to really tell here, but Bruce kicks through it, and on the other side, he finds a hidden tunnel. We see him crawl through the tunnels, and he's like, yeah, these rooms are, like the back of my hand. I know all the places here in my own manor, but like, it's a little bit disconcerting when the fact of I find a bloody handprint on the wall, and then followed by a bloody axe. And clearly somebody's been moving around here, and it's Zsasz. It's Victor Zsasz. It has to be. So we follow Seth as he goes outside, and as he does, his whole thing is that like, oh, I'm dead. I'm already dead. It's so cold out here. And they remark like, yeah, man, it's snowing. We get it. And his wheel catches in the snow and apparently falls down into a sinkhole that is just opened up outside the manor. And his gurney that he's being wheeled out on, he's strapped down to it. So he falls the whole way down. He lands at the bottom of the pit, and a bunch of rats come out and start chewing on his face. And immediately the orderlies are like, oh, God. That's so messed up. And we see Eric Border, who is like, hey, Seth, we'll get you out of there. And he starts climbing down in the sinkhole, trying to go rescue Seth. He manages to get him unhooked from the gurney. They send down a little winch to lift them up, and they rescue them both. And the other orderly is like, oh, hey, Eric, you did a great job there. You're a regular Superman. He's like, heh, never been called that before. So they load Seth up into the ambulance, and finally he says, I'm awake, my nightmare is over. So we then follow back to Bruce, where he's still making his way down the hallways when all of a sudden he gets jumped by the murderer. And he's like, this guy isn't Zsasz. He doesn't fight like Zsasz. Nothing here is screaming Zsasz to me. So we see he manages to discern a little bit about the fighting style that he plans on attacking when these lanterns, these little, like, I call them like minor, like prospector lanterns, he's got up on his helmet. He uses them to blind Bruce and then attacks, but Bruce catches on. He sweeps his leg, manages to punch out the lanterns, but it turns out that in the middle of the fight, the guy does have one last little flash grenade. He uses it to stun Bruce, blind him momentarily, and get him out of there. So at that point, Bruce is like, and once he leaves, that's when I finally smell it. The smell of death, the smell of rotting and decay. And we see him stumble across Victor Zsasz, who is trapped in the walls of Arkham, and he has been tortured to death. And he's like, wow, man, anyone who can do that to Zsasz, that's a real tough cookie. But then Zsasz speaks, and he says very faintly, please help me. We cut over to Gotham General Hospital. We see the ambulance driving up to the hospital and then into the hospital, straight through the front doors. The clerks start screaming out, everyone get some fire and rescue here. They check on the drivers of the ambulance, and both of them have their throats slit open. And it turns out that Seth has lost it again. So he's on the run. He's moving around. We see that Victor Zsasz has been dropped onto the desk of the head doctor in charge, manages to leave him there. He'll get the medical help he needs to survive, probably, if he's lucky. But then we get the weird, I don't even know how to describe it, the final page here. So we get Eric Border, who recognized that the old man who was brought in 2 issues ago, I think, maybe last issue, was actually someone important. And he was brought in as John Doe. But then we see the Eric Border. He slips his personality, and as revealed over in Batman number 36, is actually the Joker. And so he takes this old man and he throws him out of the wheelchair saying, "Oh, you're so pathetic. I'm so disappointed in you. Maybe you've always managed to remake yourself too much and you've finally gone too far." And he throws off his clothes and he's like, "Look, I'm out of here. I'm bailing for a little while. I'm going to go do Endgame over in Batman's book, but I need you to stay here and do what's right here at Arkham." And he shows that this guy is actually Clayface. He transmutes his body, starts ripping it apart, and manages to turn it into this goopy-looking version of Clayface with white skin and big red lips, and he calls him Clownface. So, okay, here's the thing. The Eric Border reveal is not really the reveal. Obviously, that was over in Batman like a month ago. So, whatever. That's fine that they're finally getting to it here. Clayface being this dude, and like for some reason the dude not knowing he's Clayface, I can accept that. I think, you know, you got fragments of Clayface that get their own sentience. That's a perfectly reasonable storyline. I'm fine with that. Joker somehow turning him into a new quote-unquote villain named Clownface? Little bit more concerned about that. That doesn't seem right. I don't know, like, just from a writing and meta perspective. And this point of the story, yeah, sure, whatever, but, like, how did Joker do it? He didn't have any toxin, not as far as I could tell, so add on top of that the Zaz stuff, I mean, that's at least an interesting development. Whatever this Seth story is going on, that could also be interesting. So it's still got potential. It's still got a lot going on. It's just a very questionable move here with Clownface. I don't know what to make of that one. All in all, I think this particular issue is probably going to be a 6.5 for me. It's just shy. I don't know. It's just lacking in a little bit of something. I don't know what. Maybe I'm just expecting a bit more of the mystery of this book, and it feels like it hasn't really delivered on that, but if we're going to get there, we're going to get there. Gotham by Midnight, number 2, written by Ray Fawkes, art by Ben Templesmith. So, last issue we had the strangest little tale of 2 kids that were abducted. They came back, they were talking funny, and long story short, the Precinct 13, led by Jim Corrigan, discovered a schoolhouse out in Slaughter Swamp that has seemingly a nun that has abducted a bunch of children, and she's very clearly evil. So, we pick up on that storyline. We have Jim just shouting at Rook, saying like, "Hey, don't look her in the eyes. We got work to do. Let's take her out." And he's just like, "What the hell is she?" Because she has a giant bony hand, very like messed up, non-human face, and he's like, "Look, Sergeant, this is a situation. You get all the kids out of here. I will deal with her." And he's just like, "What? Deal with? How are you going to just shoot that thing?" And he's like, "Nope. Look, I'm an expert. This is how we handle it. Get moving." And we see all this time, he's like struggling to hold back this electricity that's coming out of his stomach. His hand turns skeletal, and he's like, "Get moving. You don't have much time." So Rook starts bringing out all the children. Meanwhile, the 2 girls back at the house, once Sister Justine entered the house, they started freaking out. So she gets kicked out by Detective Drake, and Justine heads back to the car and calls it in saying, "Hey, Dr. Tarr, it's important." And as the lieutenant picks up and just like, "Hey, something awful's been done to them. Please send the Dr. Tarr." And she can barely be heard. She's speaking in barely a whisper. And we get a flashback to her past years ago where she's talking to the Mother Superior and a priest about something that she saw. Something about some altar boys who were doing something to some men. And like green ooze was dripping from their face and something was happening. And the guy's like, "Hey, it's fine. You reported it. You took care of it. Everything's done. So you're good." And she's like, I don't know. I still just feel like something's bad about that. And he's like, Well, you should have let it go. And it turns out both the priest and the Mother Superior have been infected by this green goop. It starts coming out of their mouth. They start turning into these monstrous forms and are coming after Justine, saying like, oh, this place is a filthy, dirty place, and now you will join us as well. It's a mad place. It needs us. And we then cut back to modern day where we see the nun, and she is freaking out, attacking Corrigan. Rook's still trying to get out kids. There's only a few left that need to be done, just like one more in the room. And we see the kids are all speaking in that same sort of made-up language. And Rook's like, what? What are you... I don't understand what you're talking about. Meanwhile, inside the schoolhouse, Corrigan's facing down the nun, saying like, all right, let's get this over with. Show me what you got. And she starts speaking in this tongues, in the same sort of language. She says ikondrid, she says dron, ovasa, a whole bunch of weird words. But as she's saying this, her head splits open sideways, and out comes this horrific multi-eyed, multi-mouthed beast that screams out ikondrid and then Gotham. So cutting back to Sister Justine's story, we see her still being attacked by the people, and in comes Jim Corrigan, and he's like, oh, you're all under arrest from the... And then all of a sudden the lightning effect starts happening again. He's like, oh, well, all right, never mind. I guess you guys are pretty dirty, because this is going to have to happen now. And he looks over to Sister Justine saying, I hope you went to confession recently, because it's about to get biblical in here. And she shields her eyes. There's a giant flash of light, followed by burning bodies in front of her. So cut back to modern day. We see Corrigan is doing what he can to take out this nun, but he's like, all right, look, I was just trying to take time, trying to make sure the kids got out, but if you really want to wrap this thing up, then fine, I know just the way to do it. And he pulls out his phone and says, I have an emergency device for things like this, and he starts playing the sound effect of a school bell. And all of a sudden the nun starts freaking out, starts like breaking apart. And apparently it was a ghost, and it's just the physical reminder to say, okay, your time is up. So that works, I guess. We cut back to Sister Justine again. She's cowering in the corner of her backstory, and Corrigan comes over saying like, hey, don't worry. It's only the bad people are dead. Also, a few people outside this room, a few homeless people outside, but like, you must be an actual, honest-to-God, clean soul, because if not, you would have been destroyed there by the Spectre. And she's like, what the hell did I see? What the hell? You just turned into a giant green flash of light. What was that? And he's like, well, look, I'm going to have to trust you now because you've seen something that you're not really supposed to see. And I think I could use your help if you really are a clean soul, because, there's not a lot of people like you out in the world. And we cut to modern day as the lieutenant's still calling for Justine, but eventually Corrigan dips in and says, hey, don't worry about that. We found the kids. They're all safe. We're going to need a bus out here. And we're going to be able to deal with them. So at that point, Sergeant Rook comes over to Corrigan and he's like, what the hell happened here, man? How are you going to write this up? And he's like, well, I'm not very good at doing paperwork, but I think the bigger question here is, what are you going to do, Rook? You came out here as internal affairs. You were going to shut down our precinct, but now you see what we actually do. So I think you're one of us now. And he's like, well, no, I'm not. I don't want any part of this. He's like, none of us want any part of this, but we're all a part of this. So he says, want to go get that drink, and I'll talk you through the old case that you mentioned earlier before. And he's like, no, it is morning. I am done. I'm going home. So we then cut to sometime later. We see that Dr. Tarr and Drake are analyzing some of the evidence that they collected from all this, the drawings and such from the plants in Slaughter Swamp and all that. And they say, oh, this is signs of the beginning of an epidemic. Like, this is something bigger is on the horizon, but we're not sure what it is right now. And they're listening to recordings of the children as they're saying, Aka in Vosta, whatever, stuff like that. And as they're playing it, the Sister Justine enters and she recognizes the names. She said, it says in Condred, and she's like, wait a minute, no, I've heard that before. Those aren't words. Those aren't just made up words. Those are names. And apparently during the sequence, during her backstory, those were some of the words that were uttered by the priest and the Mother Superior that were taken over. So she's like, yeah, I don't know about the rest of the words, but those ones, those are names. And she turns to Corrigan and is like, when you first found me, those were the names that were being uttered. And Corrigan's like, well, I'm I don't want to hear that, because that means that this is something that's been going on for a while now, and there's something bigger than all this other stuff going on. So they write down the names, Osovo, Ikondrid, Amoror, Dron, and she's like, well, I don't know what they mean. Maybe this thing's got 5 names, maybe it's got 5 bodies, or both, but it's something, and we're going to have to find out what it is. And we get one final page of a cut to the nun's head split open again with the weird multi-mouthed creature inside, but there seems to be some sort of plants or flower growing out of the middle that's very like flesh toned, and something of Gotham in like a portal in a fire behind it. It's all very artistic and symbolic. So yeah, look, it's a 2-issue intro. It's saying, okay, here's the characters. We're getting the fish out of water into the story, like all this stuff. And we're building up the bigger piece of this, of there's something crazy going on in Gotham, and it's involving some deep, deep, dark demon stuff. So I enjoy it. I think art style, I think I said this last time, is very much, you're going to love it or hate it. Like, it's not house style at all. It's very artistic, very sketchy. So you're either going to really like it or you're really going to dislike it. But I think for me, it works for what's being told here. It allows for more of this unknowable aspect. It allows for things to not quite have to appear the way they need to for you to understand it. And yeah, I think overall, I'm just intrigued in what the story is going to be presenting. The fact that this is something that's been following this Sister Justine character at least brings this group into a more personal motivation with it. So I'm going to give this one, I'll give it a 7. I'll give it a straight 7. I think it's very good, but I'm looking forward to how it's going to be able to improve and build on what it's already established here. Superman number 37, written by Geoff Johns, art by John Romita Jr. So last issue, Ulysses' ship taking 6 million people over to the Promised Land, and Ulysses knocks out Superman when he realizes not everything's on the up and up. And it's revealed that in order for the other dimension, the good place, to survive, humanity has to pay for it. So we pick up with Superman locked in this crazy ass machine thing, and Ulysses like, hey, I promise you, Superman, I'm not going to let any more harm come to you. And this is basically just a little bit where Superman's like trying to fight against it, trying to break out, and he's like, hey, look, I've built this machine. It's holding you, and it's imitating kryptonite, but not quite as strong, but still enough to keep you on the down low, but only if you struggle. Please stop struggling. So as Ulysses is talking, out comes Cleric, the villain from the beginning of the issue. He has some sort of conversation with Ulysses in an alien speech, and as Cleric points over at Superman, he says, no, he is my friend, and Ulysses gets punched for that as Cleric walks off. So Superman's like, what the hell is that all about? And he's like, okay, here's the full story. Cleric is my adoptive father. He's the one who first found me on the Great World in the 4th dimension, and he taught me the ways of the Seekers, and that fight that we had was just a lie in order to get the people of Earth to trust me, in order to get you to trust me, because the people would follow you. And we see people still going up into the beam of light. Lois and Jimmy are like, man, this is crazy. I can't believe people are doing this. So Ulysses says, yeah, look, I'm doing what has to be done. In order to save my world, it requires these people to do this. Like, there are 7 billion people on Earth, and they are coming back at every moment. He goes full Thanos. He's like, think about your natural resources. You're running low on that stuff. I'm just helping you out in that sort of thing, you know? And like, you're Kryptonian. You're going to be alive when all of humanity manages to collapse. Do you really want to just be around for that? And Superman's like, you can't punish someone for something that hasn't happened yet, man. We don't know what they're going to do. And he's like, what do you mean we? Like, I'm not human. I'm not like you. We're different than them. We shouldn't have to be that. And he straight up says, like, after everything I've seen on Earth, I hate being human. So Superman pulls out the, what would your parents think? And he's like, they wanted to leave too. They get it. And we see them going towards the beam of light, and we see people being loaded up, and they're like, oh, please, we're Neil's parents. Let us talk to Ulysses. And Ulysses hops on like a video call, and he's just like, hey, Mom, hey, Dad, bye, because he forbid them from going into the light. But whoopsie, they went into the light anyway. So they get beamed up, and Ulysses is like, all right, that's 6 million, let's go. So immediately the ship teleports over. By the way, earlier he said he would let Superman go once all this is done. He'd send him back. No big deal. So They go to the Great World, they get teleported there, and it's this beautiful looking landscape, a whole bunch of Escher sort of geometry. And the people inside are looking out and they're like, oh my god, it's beautiful, this is amazing, it's great. And Ulysses explains, the Great World is powered by its core, its life energies have to be replenished every decade, and I am a designated seeker, which means I go across the 5 dimensions to find fuel for our planet, and it takes about 5 million human lives to do that. So yeah, I'm taking them in order to do that. Once their bodies are broken down into fuel, our world will be safe again. And Superman's like, you've done this before? And he's like, yeah, we've done this tons of times. Like, this is the way the world has to be in order to save our world. Like, well, if you had a chance to save Krypton, wouldn't you do it? And he's like, I wouldn't sacrifice people to do it. He's like, no, it's not like, this isn't just like us keeping on the lights. Like, this is all of the life on the planet relies on this. If not, the planet would die in like a matter of days, you know? Like, it's on the verge, it's on the brink, and I am the one who is saving it here. And Superman, once again, says, like, what would your parents say? He's like, stop it. Stop it talking about what they would think. It doesn't matter. So Superman says, look, these are transport ships. Bring everyone here back to Earth. If this planet goes, we can still save your people. We can find them a place on Earth. And Ulysses is like, Earth sucks. That was the whole point of the last issue. Were you not listening to me? So Superman uses his X-ray vision. He starts looking through the crowds of people that are on the deck down below him. And he's like, no, this world is a paradise, and it's built on the lives of innocent. It's exactly what it needs to be. And Superman says, like, okay, but once again, let me bring up your parents. And Ulysses is like, I swear to God, man. He's like, no. Your parents are on board. Your parents came on board despite you forbidding them. And he's like, no, they wouldn't do that. And he's like, I'm Superman. I don't lie. You know that. And he's like, oh, God. And Superman's like, look, we have to find a way to save all these people. Save your parents, or else you're going to let them die. And Ulysses blasts Superman with some energy, freeing him from his restraints, saying, okay, we need to get to the observation chamber. There's a fuel cell there. It'll give me the power to do what we need to do. And then we somehow need to convince my people to board the ships away from paradise. And we'll only have a few days before the planet explodes. And Superman's like, that's plenty of time. We'll be fine. So they bust into the center thing. A bunch of the aliens start fighting against them. Superman busts open the fuel core for Ulysses to suck it all in, absorb it, and he uses the energy to transport all of the people out back to Earth. Not his people, but the Earth people. And he says, all right, they're back. Your X-ray vision, can you see them? Are my parents safe? And we see Claire comes in, he starts throwing punches, and Superman, and apparently, because they drained the fuel cell, Ulysses says, Cleric's right, because the ship's drive is offline, I need to put it back or else it's going to be catastrophic. But he doesn't manage to in time. It prematurely has detonated the core of the planet. And so Superman's like, look, I can get to it. I can fix it. And he's like, no, you can't do anything. We got to bring the humans back. And Superman just grabs Ulysses, flies as fast as he can off the planet, and the entire planet explodes. They didn't have days. They had seconds. So as the planet explodes, it knocks out Superman for a minute. He comes to, he sees the explosion happening, and he sees Ulysses there being like, you could hear them scream, couldn't you? You could hear them scream right up until the atmosphere disappeared off the planet. Those were my people. That was my entire world, and they are all dead because I helped you do this. I helped you kill my entire people. You lied to me, and you destroyed my planet. And he grabs hold of Superman and starts choking him out. And that's where the issue ends. Some good pathos, I'll give you that. I mean, the fact that Superman is directly, quote-unquote, responsible for an entire planet of not peaceful, but sentient creatures being destroyed, that's different for Superman. I'll give him that at the very least. It's always been a thing with this arc. I've said it time and time again. Writing's good, story's good, art's a little for me. There are a couple panels in this issue that are very for me, but it's not a bad one. It's not a bad issue by any means. I think it's a little bit too, I don't even say rushed. It's poorly paced. The first half of the issue is very slow, very talky, and the back half of the issue feels like we're just sprinting. Like we're just, okay, we got the fuel cell, let's go, planet blew up, done. Like it felt like that was like 4 pages. So it's a little bit lopsided there, but ultimately it tells a good story. I'd say this is a This is like a 7.5. I give it that much. It's very close to a 7, but a 7.5. Aquaman number 37, written by Geoff Parker, art by Paul Pelletier. So last issue, we had Martian Manhunter guest starring in order to find a portal somewhere in Atlantis that Aquaman's mom may have used to fake her death. So we see pretty much immediately they've tracked it down. It's underneath a giant amount of rubble behind a wall that also went down that night. So they pick up the rubble of the wall, and they managed to find this giant-ass portal sitting there. And it's like, oh yes, the ancient Atlanteans must have used these portals, exploiting natural wormholes in space and time. And they see that the keystone for it, the artifact that's needed, is literally Arthur's trident. So it's like, perfect. And they see a bunch of stones, and they say, oh, these tablets determine what is on the other side. And they notice one of the symbols, they recognize it from John's memory, and they don't know what it decodes to, but they're like, well, it's got to be Maelstrom, right? That thing that we were talking about. So put it on in, let's go. And Mara's like, hey, I'm coming with you. And Aquaman's like, yeah, sure, why not? I mean, this is my thing, but I'm happy to have you with. So they go through, and they get the trident to come with them. It's on their side now. So then the scientists are looking at it and they say, oh, hey, look at that. Underneath all of this rubble, there's another tablet here, and it's the only one that's been destroyed. I wonder what's special about this one. But back with Aquaman, they see where the portal opens up. It opens into the open air, and it is Gorilla City, to which the gorillas are like, humans in Gorilla City. Summon the guards, do all this stuff. And immediately Mara's ready to fight. And Aquaman's like, whoa, hold on. I remember how to do this. Lower your head, put out your hand. And in walks Soule, who is the leader of the gorillas. And Aquaman, and he's like, oh, yeah, somebody knows our ways. Nice to see you, Aquaman. And he tells all the people, like, this guy's from Atlantis. He's an Atlantean. We're all cool. And so, like, Solivar's just totally cool. Like, Arthur's just like, oh, yes, it's good to see you. I heard that you died over in Flash. And he's like, it's sort of, kind of, but not really. I'm good now. So he's surprised that the portal's still working because they don't have a key to activate it on their side. It's been 15 years since it was last used. And Mara, as they're just talking away, it's just like, and I'm Mara, by the way, if anybody wants to know what I'm doing on here, but why do you guys have gates to Atlantis? And he's like, oh, it's a long story. How about some food? You know, I got a feast we can have. So he explains that back when Gorilla City was known as Katangala and all of that, it was previously a place where ancient Atlanteans were. And as such, you know, they had some high-tech stuff. They had the portals, and that's what they used to travel between normal Atlantis and Katangala. And at that point, all of the Atlanteans eventually left. They took their engineering with them, and nobody really knew how to make it work, but it still caused a little bit of the protection stuff. That's why Gorilla City has always been hidden. So Gorilla City was actually Atlantis to begin with, or Atlanteans, I should say. So at that point, Arthur's like, look, you said the gate opened 15 years ago. Did you see it? Did you see who went through? And he's like, no. I was not king at that point. The person who was king was Grodd. So they make their way over to the prisoner area where Grodd is being held at. And Mara's like, hey, if Grodd's so evil, why haven't you just killed him? And Solivar explains that the gorillas of Gorilla City, because they're telepathic, have a hive mind sort of aesthetic thing going on. But because Grodd is so evil, what they've decided to do is take all of their bad thoughts and evil things and just push them into Grodd. So he gets more and more malevolent, but the rest of society is like, awesome, everything's nice and cool all the time. So it's actually a benefit to keeping him alive. And so they reach Grodd's cell, and they've got him, held down. He's trapped and whatnot. He can't escape. And Arthur goes in, and Grodd's just like, oh, you and the Justice Leaguers are the reason that I'm here to begin with, and I already know, Atlantean, what you're here, because my mind is connected to the rest of the gorillas, as you already know, and so I know what they know. And he's like, look, if you had checked on me within the past few months, you would know that I've learned to protect my mind. They can't see into my mind anymore. So even if you ask me these questions, I still have to willingly tell you. They can't just get it from in depth of my mind. And he's like, fine, Grodd, what do you want? And he's like, I know you're not going to let me out of here, so I just want something that you can actually deliver on. I want to fight you. Like, it doesn't, win, lose, whatever. I just want to be able to fight you. And Mara's like, this is so a trap, man. Don't do this. And Arthur's like, nah, I could beat this guy up. No problem. So at that point, Solivar stops him being like, okay, but like, seriously? I don't know what he's planning. He's right. I can't read his mind. You really shouldn't do this. But at that point, Grodd's already thrown a punch and the fight begins. And at that point, he does manage to let his guard down just a little bit, and that's where Solivar is able to suss out, wait a minute, hold on. He knows where a weakness in the structure is. He's going to break out, and he punches Arthur through a wall. They manage to get out of the building, and he's just like, yes, I'm able to escape. You see, man is able to man will unleash any danger when he is desperate. You guys are, you come at me and you think all this stuff of like, oh, you want to find out the portals for the sake of your place, and Atlantis is falling apart and whatnot, but I can see your true motives, Aquaman. You just want your mommy back. That's the whole reason you're doing this. And Aquaman just punches him in the face and just starts beating him down, just being like, shut up. You don't know me. Tell me what I need to know. And he manages to get Grodd beaten down to the ground. And Grodd's like, all right, fair enough. So he beams the vision into his head of the portal opening up. The gorillas are like, who the hell are you? And his mom's like, I'm Queen of Atlantis. I see you're all apes now. And it's like, oh, you use that portal. Show me how it works. And it's like, yeah, totally. So you use these tablets, and then you take your magic scepter, and you activate it, and you can go through. And she activates it again to go through to a different place. And he's like, that's cool, but I don't have a magic scepter. Where can I get one of those? But she's already through the portal. And he's like, wait, damn it. So Grodd's like, yeah, she was here for like a minute, and then she just bailed to go through another portal. So yeah, I don't really know what's up. But he also gives the little bit extra thing of, did you know the Atlanteans didn't just get up and bail? They didn't just leave behind their tech and then the apes came in. The Atlanteans bred super smart apes using their own little super smart making kelp. And then when the apes got too smart to be a servant class anymore, they did an uprising. They wanted to be treated as equals. The Atlanteans cast them out into the forests. And then eventually we had a Planet of the Apes routine and all the Atlanteans were killed. And that's how the apes took Gorilla City. So at that point, as he's beaming this into Arthur's head, he somehow manages to get up. He kicks Arthur and he grabs his scepter. He activates the portal to somewhere. We don't get to see where. And Arthur's like, oh no, you're not getting away that easy. And as Grodd goes through, Aquaman grabs hold and they both go through the portal as Mara says, no, don't, you'll never return. So he's somewhere. God only knows where. This is just like, let's bring in characters from all the other books. Martian Manhunter, read Justice League United. Gorilla Grodd, read Flash. It's not a bad issue. I think this particular issue feels like it's a little bit of an artificial extension of the mystery. This idea that she popped in here for literally like 10 seconds and then bounced is like, okay, well, did she really need to do that? But to get a little bit of extra on, how is Grodd going to play a part in this? We've got multiple things of telepathy going on between Martian Manhunter and Grodd now, so maybe that's going to be playing a bigger part of it. All in all, I'm interested in the storyline still. I don't think it's losing me quite yet here, but we'll see how long it actually manages to go before it actually has to reveal something as to what is actually going on here. So I'm going to give this one I'll give it a flat 7. It's all right. It's good. I think the voice for Arthur is very good here because just that cockiness of wanting to beat down Grodd, that was a very good moment for him. So yeah, 7 for this. The Flash number 37, written by Robert Venditti and Van Jensen, art by Brett Booth. So in the last issue, Flash discovered he was somewhere in the Speed Force without his powers, and there's a whole civilization built here. And then in the real world, future Flash has killed a guy who would have become a mass killer, but hadn't yet. So we got some weird future thought crime stuff going on. Anyway, we go to it says outside the bounds of normal space-time. I guess I don't actually know if this has been revealed to be Speed Force up to this point, but it definitely has been in the first page here. As they enter into the civilization, we get the guy who, I can't even remember what his name is. I don't think they even say it again here, is like, hey, yeah, look around. We got people from all different ages here. We got a seamstress from 1762. We got a doctor from 2054. And Flash is like, 2054? How is that possible? We haven't hit that year yet. And the guy's like, yeah, time doesn't really work in these parts. Like, we've been here long enough that some people have met each other, fallen in love, got married and all that. But, like, they can't have kids because there's no trimesters. So, like, time doesn't actually progress in any way. And also, we don't grow old and it's eternally daytime. And he's like, okay, but this doesn't look like the Speed Force. That was completely different art style. And it's like, yeah, well, that must be one of the islands over there. We can see the other islands, we just can't get to them. So he points out the thunderbolt on Flash's chest, and he's like, if that means what I think it does, I think I can help you with your abilities. But then all of a sudden this dude runs in saying, oh, contact, something's coming, something's happening. And the spotter says that there's lots more than the previous raids showing up here. Oh, sorry, the guy's name is Mr. Selkirk. Did not remember that at all. So lots more showing up, and Flash is like, oh, what's going on? What's out there? And he's just like, oh, well, I hope that you can hold your own in a battle without your abilities, whatever they may be. So then we cut to Central City. And if you remember last issue, Future Flash gave Iris a story, a little hint as to where to go, as to do something. And we get a third-person narrator, turns out to be Iris's editor. It's basically hyping her up, saying she came to me with a story saying this big thing that city officials had covered up, but like she insisted that she'd be able to go and check it out. And she broke into some shipping containers outside of town, and inside they were loaded up with dead bodies. And it turns out that these were all of the dead bodies from Forever Evil. When the crime syndicate attacked, there were so many dead people that they literally did not have the time to be able to go through and even ID them all, let alone give them proper burials. So the city's just been putting them here and putting them off until time could be, and like nobody's families were notified. None of that happened. So Iris writes up the story, and immediately it's a huge hit. Every paper sells out. It's this whole huge thing here where she's now having to put City Hall's feet to the fire. She's made a name for herself, and the editor's just like, oh, you've got to hold them accountable. And Iris is like, oh, I promise, one day they will. So and then we go over to the police station, and the captain or director Singh is like, that stupid ass reporter just made our jobs a million times worse because now we have to do 200 plus unsolved murders that are definitely not going to be solved because there's no evidence or chain of evidence with them. It's going to be impossible to do this. No one's going to want to step up. And Barry, who's Future Flash, is like, I'll do it. And he's like, seriously? It's going to be on your record. It's like a bunch of unsolved cases, and this is a media circus. He's like, hey, it's no big deal. I'll keep Iris under taps. And he's like, yeah, please do that. So at that point, Patty steps up and is just like, are you sure? What about not taking on too much? And he's like, hey, it's no problem. We'll get all the bodies lined up, and I'll just super speed through them. No big deal. And then Patty says, well, what about this case? This random kid in his dorm room was found dead, and no one can find. The doors were locked, and there's no bullets or anything like that. We don't know how he died. And Barry's like, oh, it says here on his computer there was a manifesto of him wanting to kill all of his fellow students. Screw that guy. I'm glad he's dead. And Patty's like, oh, Barry, I can't believe you'd say such a thing. That's so hard. What about truth? What about justice? And Barry storms off like, as far as I'm concerned, justice has been served. So Patty sticks around with the morgue specialist, and she's just like, hey, guys can get like that sometimes. Don't worry about it. Want to help me cut into this dead body? And so they cut into the grad student's dead body, and inside they find out that his heart has been essentially pureed. And she's like, I've seen this kind of injury once before, but it was from a speedster. Who could have caused this? All the other speedsters we are taking care of. So we go back into the Speed Force, and we see that they're lining up next to a gate with a whole bunch of guns. Flash is handed a 2-shot flintlock. And he's like, yeah, I don't really know how to use one of these. And he's like, well, tough, that's all we got. As the main dude, Selkirk, pulls out this Blastomatic from like the 2030s. And it's this hyper-futuristic rifle thing. And he's like, all right, you got 2 rounds, Flash, make them count. So through the walls bust a group of people riding on various forms of cybernetic dinosaurs and like mastodons and stuff. The Blastomatic fires off, takes out a giant-ass elephant. And then the rest of them just go into fight by hand as best they can. We do see that Selkirk's about to get attacked by a prehistoric bird. Also, they're being... I don't know if I said this. They are being ridden by a group, like a gang that is coming in and trying to take their stuff. But the cybernetic bird comes in, almost attacks Selkirk, and Flash manages to fire off one of the shots through its head. And he's like, oh, hey, you did a pretty good job there. And not every day can be a good day in paradise. And Flash is like, paradise? Dude, I've been attacked by dinosaurs, killer robots, and whatever the hell these things for. And he's just like, oh, they're Paleo-Indians. They were migrating to the Americas during the Pleistocene. But trust me, this is paradise. You gotta taste this terror bird. So Flash is like, hey, look, man, I get it. You're trying to make me feel at home here, but, like, I gotta go. I got a life out there. I can't stay here. And he's like, well... I don't think that you'll be able to do that, but if you insist on leaving, I'll be your guide, and you may have come from the sky. We don't know if we can get you back to the sky, but we can get the sky to you. And he points up to this mountaintop that's really, really high and craggly, and I guess they're going to go climb it. So we cut back to Central City. Future Barry's having dinner with Patty, and she's pissed off. Like, I can't believe you said such awful things about that kid. And he's like, I'm sorry. It's just getting to me. All those bodies and what that. We're never going to be able to find justice for them. And she's like, all right, well, still, just don't be a jerk, Plus, there's something about the Speed Force that resulted in that kid dying. Maybe you should look into that a little bit. And he's like, oh, yeah, that's crazy. Anyway, you look beautiful tonight. And she's like, oh, thanks. So they go out, they cuddle up on the town. He's clearly enjoying himself. And as they make their way past a horse-drawn carriage, we see the guy like look out from under his hat, and he's very shady looking. And then all of a sudden this dickwad on a cell phone is super loud, super obnoxious. It's just like, hey, I need a lift in my car. It's just across the park. And he hops into it, and he's making a call saying how he's going to like close the sale, and these guys are suckers and da-da-da. And the dude driving the carriage taps the little sign on the side of the carriage saying, no cell phones, please. And the guy in the call's like, excuse me, buddy, I'm on a call here. Yeah, no, I can talk. And then all of a sudden the carriage driver says, get out, get out. And his eyes light up with electricity. The dude starts running. And then, as far as I could tell, the guy's cell phone explodes with energy that just incinerates the guy's head to a crisp instantaneously. And the dude in the buggy, who's got, big stovepipe hat and all that, says, I warned him. You heard me, Alistair. He wouldn't listen. He wouldn't stop buzzing. They're always buzzing, so noisy. Soon I'll silence them all. So this guy is the clerk at the local movie theater telling you to silence your phones. This is movie theater clerk man. Truly a terrifying villain. No, it's another solid issue. It's an alright story being told. I think the problem I'm having right now with it, besides the Brett Booth art, which sometimes is very shaky, that's just how it is that I can't tell how long this is going to be. And I know that's not like something that should be in the story. Like, a good story can go on just forever, but like in terms of this particular thing of future Barry having the place of current Barry and current Barry being stuck in the Speed Force, I just want to know whether I should buckle down for this being the status quo for like another 6 issues, or if this is something that's going to be wrapped up next issue. I don't quite have a feel for that yet. Everything else is perfectly fine, though. I mean, it's telling the story well enough. If we do get another new villain introduced here, I don't know. I feel like we should be focusing on Future Barry going all Injustice style rather than, oh, here's a guy whose cell phone exploding powers will kill everybody. I don't think we need that little diversion of focus yet, but we'll see what we get. All in all, yeah, it's like a 7. Secret Origins number 8, featuring the origins of Grayson, Animal Man, and Katana. So we'll start off with Grayson. Mind you, different than Nightwing. This is specifically Grayson, and this is written by Tim Seeley and Tom King, art by Stephen Mooney. So we pick up at St. Hadrian's Finishing School. This is before anything that happened in Grayson, and we see Helena Bertinelli's chewing out one of the students for doing something bad, and she goes and says some code word to a giant painting on the wall, which sends her into a back room belonging to Spiral. And as she makes her way back, she's making a meeting with Mr. Minos, her leader, supervisor, whatever you want to call, and apparently a recent agent named 25, who was the previous partner of Helena, is dead, and as such she is able to suggest who she would like to become her new partner. And she's like, yes, I have someone, upload the memory file, it is of Dick Grayson. And we get the whole thing. He was in the circus, he did the acrobats. We see a review from circuspeanuts.com saying how super cool he was, right up until his parents were killed because Tony Zuko did some stuff. And he went out, he went to foster care, he tried to avenge his parents, and eventually he ended up in Bruce Wayne's care. Bruce Wayne, of course, being Batman, said, hey, don't get revenge, or, I'll help you find the peace that you're looking for there. And ultimately he was brought on to become Robin. And she gets all this stuff from newspapers saying yes, it turns out Batman was the one who beat people up, but Robin was the one who made sure that everyone was okay, So we see his time afterwards. He occasionally left Gotham to work with Arsenal or Starfire and had a whole thing there with a romance with her. Eventually he grew up, became Nightwing, went out and got his own style of stuff. He even became Batman for a while when Bruce Wayne disappeared following whatever the hell New 52's final crisis was, and had his own Robin at that point. So it was only during the Forever Evil crossover that he was seemingly killed in front of everyone else. He had his identity revealed, and everyone thought he was dead. However, as Helena was going out and going after a cult called the Fist of Cain, she discovered that there was someone else who was making moves against them. She followed this person and discovered it was Dick Grayson. And she thinks that Dick Grayson, he's got all the skill sets, he's got the right belief system, and the fact that the world thinks he's dead is going to be super cool, and I think we can make that work for us. And she's saying all this to Mr. Minos and saying, yep, he's got a good sense or he doesn't have the good sense to give up. I think he's a perfect candidate for Spiral. And Mr. Minos is like, very interesting, but here's the thing. I'm your superior. I know what you're thinking before you think it, and I just don't like the Bat family. We've had some bad blood recently, so I'm going to decline you. But here's the thing. Not only am I going to decline you, because I knew this was coming, I've actually collected Dick Grayson. Check it out. He's sitting right here. And we get him bound and gagged. He's got tape on his head saying, so I'm going to ask you, instead of making him your partner, go ahead and kill him right here, right now, and we're going to send him in a box back to the Bat family. And Helena pulls out her crossbow, shoots him in the head without even questioning, just like, yes, of course, no problem. And Minos is like, oh, okay, congratulations. That was, wow. Yeah, all right, sounds good. And we see that the whole thing was fake, wasn't actually Grayson. It was just a little decoy thing. And it's just like, yep, well, you are truly Huntress, or, not actually, but you are truly the woman of Hadrian's. And so go ahead, see if he wants in, and if so, he can be a member of Spiral. And we cut to now as Grayson's just leaning back on his chair as they're in the middle of a mission, just recounting this story of how they kicked Penguin in the face one time. And she's just like, oh my God, why do you insist on sharing the most boring stories with me? And she's like, it's how you know me, and because to know me is to love me, is what he says. And so they jump out a window and show that they've got lives to save. So I like that one. I do think it's a bit weird because I am 95% sure there was already a Nightwing story written in this Secret Origins book, so it's kind of recapping that at the same time. I might be wrong, but I'm almost positive of that. Beyond that, I mean, it's an okay thing for Grayson. I'd say 6.5. I don't know. It doesn't have the same stuff the normal Grayson stories have, the panache to it. So next up, we have Animal Man, written by Jeff Lemire and Duffy Boudreau, art by Travel Foreman, and it's just recounting the story of Animal Man as in Jeff Lemire's run, pretty much beginning to end, a little bit more at the beginning. We say, yeah, here's the Red. They have avatars. It's this whole thing, and that's how one of them became a legend. And we see that the avatar prior to the current one was killed by Anton Arcane, but it was before the right avatar, the one that was supposed to be, was ready. So they contacted Buddy Baker, sorry, I blanked on his name for a second, and said, okay, we're going to make you a temporary stand-in. You will be not a champion, but they said like he's a temporary emissary. And he was so not ready for it, they had to pretend that they were aliens, but they ended up giving him the red powers. And he went out and he did like political work. He fought for animal rights and stuff. He also starred in movies. He was an actor, and he really, really loved his family. That was the other thing that set him apart, which would be viewed as a weakness in the animal kingdom, but they let it happen. However, the true champion ended up getting her powers very early on, and it turned out to be Buddy's daughter, Maxine, and this is where the Normal Animals Man story picks up. Before they can do anything about her powers, they are attacked by the Hunters 3 of the Rot. They manage to get a hold of Maxine, turn her powers against the rest of the world, and then Rot World happens, a crossover with Swamp Thing, a future set story where they now have to fight against a world where there's barely anybody surviving. Everyone else has been absorbed by the Rot. And as they go after Anton Arcane in this future world, the Parliament of the Rot says, hey, we don't actually like this. We want things to go back to normal. So they send him back in time. But in doing so, Maxine manages to defeat the Rot, but at the sacrifice of his son, Cliff Baker. So at that point, the family's torn apart. We see Buddy goes in front of the Parliament and says, you guys suck. Get my daughter out of this deal. I don't want you around her anymore. And they say, you suck. You don't have any powers anymore. So they cast him out, but it's at the worst possible time because Brother Blood ends up taking over the Parliament, becomes the new champion, disavowing Maxine. She loses her powers. And we see that Buddy manages to ascend and do all this other stuff in order to try to rescue his daughter from the Red, where she is currently trapped. He gets in, he fights against Brother Blood, and ultimately they all manage to win out the day. And the reason that Buddy has so much strength and all that, his cosmic destiny, is because of his love for his family. And then he joined Justice League United. So that's the whole story. And we see it's being recounted to us by Shepard, who is teaching a whole bunch of younglings in the Red, a bunch of, what do they call them, Redlings, and says, oh, you never know which one of you is going to grow up to become the next Animal Man. So I like it. I think it definitely slims down the Animal Man story just down to its bare bones essentials, but it works. It does it fine. So art by Travel Foreman, always going to love that. So I'll give this one I'll give it a 7.5. A lot of that's for the Travel Foreman art, but just because I like this run, and recounting it really works for me. And lastly, we get the Katana story, written by Ann Nocenti, art by Roger Robinson. So at the end of Ann Nocenti's Katana run, there was a hanging plot thread of a ghost that took over a little girl named Mona Shard. The ghost is named Mona Shard. Turns out Katana has captured this ghost in the girl's body still. It has a full skull outfit and horns coming out of its head. And she's just walking with this girl wrapped in chains down a railroad track. And she's just saying stuff of oh yeah, there's all these old western towns out here that dried up when the gold ran out, or too many people were killed, or they ran out of resources or whatnot. And the girl is just arguing with Mona Shard all in the same body. And Katana just keeps telling her to shut up, I don't want to hear any of this, you're going completely insane. And Mona points out that the girl was always kind of a bitch, whereas the girl points out that Mona is just literally an evil ghost. So as they walk, she says something about having her childhood stolen, and oh, did you ever have one, Miss Katana? Probably not. And she says, okay, you want a bedtime story before your final dirt nap? Sure, here you go. And we recap years ago in rural Japan how Katana was friends with two brothers named Masao and Takeo, and apparently they were trying to build a trading card deck that was all about weapons, and they were really looking for this one final card that Katana needed to fulfill her deck. And it turns out that there was a ghost train that was passing through the town that if they hopped on it, they knew for some reason the card was on the train. So they go through, and as they go through, there's apparently a bunch of weapon freaks, such as Sword Boy, Hammerhead, Garotte Girl, the Snare Woman, and Bulletproof Boy. And they all start attacking the gang, or more specifically Katana, as she's holding it off so the boys can find the card. Eventually, they do find the card, they run off, and the ghost train just drives away and is just gone. And it turns out this card was the Soul Taker's sword. So she's like, finally, I've got it. I've completed my deck. But then it turns out her parents found out she stole the trading card. They bring her to some sort of master sensei saying, our daughter's out of control. She's stealing things. Please help her. And the sensei's like, before modern feudal law existed, there were the outsiders. They showed up and they enforced law. You got that outsider spirit in you. Don't ever apologize for that. But maybe, like, just pretend to be a normal girl. Like pink things and, like, chase after boys and whatnot. But never, ever, ever, like, give up that outsider spirit. You are going to kill many, many people, and you're never going to be able to settle the score. You got that? And she's like, absolutely, will do. So back in the modern timeline, she's like, that was weird. Like, you did marry, you did settle down, you did all that stuff. And she's like, yeah, well, you know, what are you going to do? And so they approach this town that has all these gravestones. And it's like, hey, remember that ghost town or ghost train I told you about? It got chased out of Japan. And they show that the ghost train pulls up on these tracks as they're walking by. Katana takes out her sword, stabs it into the girl, drawing the ghost of Mona Shard out and casting it into the ghost train. To which Mona Shard, the girl resumes her normal thing. And she's like, you know, the ghost was like evil, but like she was kind of fun as well. I like the fact that she made me feel empowered and whatnot. And Katana's like, you can do that yourself. What do you usually do? And she's like, oh, well, I try to join all the boys' clubs. And she's like, what's a better thing you can do? She's like, make my own girls' club and make it better than the boys' club. And she's like, that's a girl. So, female empowerment, I guess. And then they just, a little ending here is like, oh, your sword, can I play with it? And she's like, no. And that's it. Look, that, like, 10 pages made more sense than any given issue of Nocenti's Katana run. Hands down. Like, I actually understood. Like, it doesn't fit with anything that happened to that run, but at the very least, it made sense. Kind of. The Ghost Train, I'm still a little confused about. Yeah, I don't know what to say. Art's okay. It's more house style, but it's fine. And it's Nocenti's Katana run. I was done with that back when it happened, and the fact they brought it back just makes me sad. So I'm going to give that one like a 5.5, but it's all on the writing and my memories of previous Katana. So, yeah, that's Secret Ordinance number 8. I think we have like 3 more issues of this, and we'll see what continuing stories we get. Deathstroke number 3, written and art by Tony S. Daniels. So last issue, we had Deathstroke meeting up with a guy named Red Fury saying, hey, we're going to go kill this Odysseus dude. You already did a job for me, but like you didn't finish it. By the way, here's some magic goo if you want to remember what happened. Deathstroke took the magic goo and had a vision of his son Jericho. So this issue picks up. Deathstroke's hiking through some snow, and he doesn't remember why he feels so tired. He's just so exhausted. He's like, man, I've been able to survive worse. Why am I so tired? And as he passes out and starts hallucinating, he thinks back to the memory of his son that he recovered. And he sees his son is trapped behind this red electrical force field. And Jericho's like, don't come any closer, Dad. It'll kill both of us. And he's like, oh, hey, I'm not going to let that happen. And Jericho calls him out for leaving them behind. He's like, I did that all for the sake of her family, including your sister, who might be okay. Let's get out of here. And they start reaching through the force field, and Jericho's like, it said it might kill us both, or worse. And he's like, well, we'll find out together. So we see Deathstroke. He manages to get up out of the snow and finds a small little cabin. And he's like, all right, I don't know what those visions are. I'll figure that all out later, but I need to get somewhere that I can call safe. And he calls his cabin home. So he thinks back to the visions again, and he sees all of the goons that were attacking him before in the normal timeline were also attacking him here in this flashback. Jericho's just holding off from the fight as Deathstroke's blasting his way through people. A bunch of scientists come up and try to restrain Jericho, get him back into his cell. Jericho freaks out, just like, get off me, I don't want you here, I said no. And he blasts out with his energy, which causes all of the scientists' heads to just explode in the most gruesome looking ways. And he's like, no, oh my God, I didn't mean to kill him. And Deathstroke's like, hey, it's cool. Sometimes you got to kill people for the greater good. It's fine. No big deal. So Deathstroke sets a bomb and breaks into this building. And on the other side of the wall is this containment, like, I don't know, field, stage, whatever you want to call it. It's something that is very medical looking. And inside is a guy saying, my name is Odysseus. Who dares wake me up? And Jericho's like, oh, hey, Odysseus, I heard them talking. He's the reason I was captured. My life force was bringing him back from the dead. And we see this Odysseus guy stand up and he's like, oh, hey, son, grandson. And immediately Deathstroke's like, I don't know what the hell you did to get out of hell, but you're going back. And he's like, oh, no, I'd never truly left. And he's like, all right, let's find out. And Deathstroke just pulls out a gun, shoots him twice in the chest, once in the head, straight through the eye, and he's down. He's already out again. And Jericho's like, oh my God, you just killed your own father, like, for me, for the sake of your son. That's great. But that doesn't change anything between us. And he's like, what are you talking about? He's just like, you think I'm going along with you? And he's like, yeah, that's the plan. He's like, well, I have plans of my own. And something about Jericho, his powers or whatever, jump into Deathstroke and he just blacks out. So he doesn't remember when these memories came from, if they are even real memories, but if it did happen, he wants to know why the heck the Red Fury guy is doing anything with him. So he manages to get a little satellite built up with a cell phone. He's like, all right, I need to be able to call someone. Tiggs, maybe? I think Tiggs might be a good call. And then immediately the phone gets hit out of his hand with like a throwing dart. And the guy behind him is Bronze Tiger, who showed up last issue, saying, hey, there's only 2 people in the world who know about that cabin. And that ain't you. You ain't one of them. And immediately he's like, hey, Tiggs, how's it going? And he's like, no, my friends call me Tiggs. You can call me Bronze Tiger. And he's like, oh, you don't recognize me. Oh, okay, that's neat. And he's like, did Slade have some dumb kids I didn't know anything about? It's like, let's find out. So they start fighting each other. We do have a nice little moment here during the fight where Slade is like subconsciously closing his right eye because he's so used to fighting without it that he's like, it's this double vision thing is driving me crazy. So he actually manages to get the upper hand on Bronze Tiger, and he's like about to kill him. And he's like, no, I'm not going to kill you. Not yet. And he's like, I can't believe I'm getting held up by some amateur. And then Red Fury comes back in, and he's like, hey, you're going to want him alive. And he's like, why? He's like, because you guys are all on the same side. You just don't remember it. And Slade calls him out like, whose side are you on? So Red Fury takes them to this big chateau even further up the mountain. And he's like, so you had your memories back? And he's like, yeah. I was like, and you remember Jericho jumping into you? Is that why you blacked out? And he's like, no. Whenever Jericho tried jumping into me before, it never caused me to black out. Like, he can't do it. It's not within his power set to do it to me. And Red Fury says, well, you know who Odysseus is now. He's your father, Charles Henry Wilson. And the government declared him dead in 1977, but he didn't actually die. He has more or less the same power set as you. The reason that you were turned into a super soldier, the powers that were put into you, came from him. He has the regeneration, but it is much stronger. And the only way that you're going to be able to kill him is if Jericho does it. He's the only one who's powerful enough to do it. So then Slade puts it all together like, oh, that memory of me being sent in, it wasn't to rescue Jericho. I was just to be a meat bag while Jericho took out Odysseus, but then I got in the way of all that. And Red Fury's like, yeah, it didn't go as planned, and then Jericho disappeared. And Slade gets upset about that. And Red Fury's like, look, my sources say Jericho turned up in Gotham City just 2 days ago, so maybe we should go check that out. And Slade's like, all right, fine, whatever. So then we go over to Gotham City, and we see somebody getting beaten up in an alleyway. And it's got like a full baseball bat and everything like that. And it turns out Harley Quinn is getting a call from Amanda Waller saying, what? Deathstroke's coming to Gotham? This is my turf, and he betrayed us over in New Suicide Squad, so I'm going to teach him a lesson. I am so tired of books just immediately crossing over with the Suicide Squad. This happens all the damn time. Have you ever noticed that? That's like DC's go-to thing of like, hey, we don't know if this book is going to sell or not. Let's tie it in with the Suicide Squad. Like all the time. I don't know why. This happened like 4 times at the beginning of New 52, where like everybody left, right, and center was like, and now the Birds of Prey meet the Suicide Squad. And now Team 7 meets the Suicide Squad. Now all this other stuff. It's like, we get it. Suicide Squad. Is it just because they're like a team that could just be easily beat up? Is that it? Is that the only reason we're doing this? Look, I know Deathstroke has better reason to do it, but like, genuinely, it just feels like this is an excuse to say, hey, everybody, Harley Quinn's in the next issue. You like Harley Quinn, right? It's just a marketing ploy. Like, there's no... Harley's not even in. She's in New York in her book. Why is she... whatever. Point being, it's not a good ending to the book. The rest of it, I'm okay with. The idea of we got more family issues here that Deathstroke is dealing with. He's been aged down, so we got this whole thing going on. It's interesting, at the very least. That ending pissed me off. Yeah. 6.5. Why not? G.I. Zombie number 5, written by Justin Gray and Jimmy Palmiotti, art by Scott Hampton. So in the last issue, Jared, our G.I. Zombie, and the rest of the army were surrounding this town, taking out the zombie virus, putting in a perimeter, while Carmen has managed to be brought to this secret location and is shown a bunch of missiles that are all set to go off against the people of the country. So we open up this issue at a high security prison. There is a prisoner named David Holder who is on death row. His execution's in 2 months, but he's being let out for a transfer. And he's like, oh, what the hell is this? I don't understand what's going on. It's like, hey, I don't know, but we're getting rid of you. We're transferring you to some sort of government holding facility. And he's like, oh, all right. And the guy says like, hey, wherever they're sending you, I hope they eat you alive. So we then go back to Sutterville, Tennessee, this small town that they are building a perimeter of the zombie virus, and a bunch of these guys going around in the woods, they find a small little white rabbit, and they point to it, and then they blow it to pieces. And it's like, do we even know if that thing was infected? And it's just like, well, screw it. We are killing every living thing around here to build this perimeter. And a guy just starts flamethrowering the entire wooded area. And it's like, yeah, we'll keep going until we meet up with Alpha Team. So we then meet back up with Jared, who's like, oh, what about the birds? And he's like hunched over. He's in pain. He's like, what if a bird got infected and it went down south for the winter? Cough, cough. And we get a gravedigger, his sergeant or whatever. It's like, hey, hang in there, son. Well, don't worry. We're going to get someone for you soon. And Scott sits up, and it's a full-page spread, and it is horrifying. His eyes are red. His skin is like blotchy and like veins popping everywhere. And he's like, well, I better get here quick. So we cut back over to David Holder, who's being flown in via helicopter. And he's like, what are you doing? Where are you taking me? And he's like, well, you're about to serve your country. Despite the fact that you are a vicious serial killer of children, we've decided to make you of use to the United States of America. And he's like, what, some kind of suicide squad? And he's like, no, not really. So he's led over to Jared's tent, and Gravedigger's just like, oh, hey, you must be the serial killer. In my religion, you would be going straight to hell, but I hear you're an atheist, so hope that doesn't matter to you. And he uncuffs David Holder, pushes him into Jared's tent, and then we just get from the outside him just screaming out in pain and agony as Gravedigger's like, now you guys, special agents who brought him here, you know the drill. If he gets out of the tent, you shoot him in the leg and throw him back in. Got it? And we see some time pass, and then Jared comes out covered in blood, and he's like, Tony, Tom, how long has it been? And it's like, oh, good, Jared, you haven't ordered takeout in a while. We thought you didn't want to talk to us. And he's like, nah, I love you guys. So turns out the Gravedigger gets a call that Carmen was seen somewhere in Utah, and they're flying Jared out there to go deal with it. Meanwhile, out in Utah, Carmen is being wined and dined, being surrounded by all of these missiles by the guy. I can't remember if they gave him a name yet, but he is in charge of all this, and Carmen's just trying to probe very gently, just saying like, oh yeah, like, I don't know what the full plan is, but you got a spa over top and this whole thing underground. I don't think I'm big enough news to deal with this. And it's just like, oh, au contraire, we heard about what you did to that federal agent. We need your kind of spunk around here. So the other girl is sent off to do other things while the guy accompanies Carmen around, just being like, hold on, let me show you the facility. Let me show you what we got here. So the spa that we got built upstairs, it's real. It's for like super rich, affluent people. They more or less fund our entire thing. But down here, this is where the real magic happens. And he opens up this door, And inside is like a full jungle with like a waterfall and stuff. Mind you, this is like salt flat territory. And he's like, yeah, we funnel down sunlight down here in order to be able to grow this stuff perfectly. And she's like, look, I know what you're doing. You're trying to like show me all this cool stuff and saying like, oh, whatever, but like, you don't got to brainwash me. I can see those missiles out there, you've got enough to decimate the country. What do you plan on doing with them? Just say that much. And he's like, well, we're going to overthrow the government and replace it with something else that's for the people, by the people, And she's like, I'm down. You don't got to brainwash me. I'm in. I'm all for it. I'm ready for it. Just tell me what's up and I will gladly do whatever I need to do to prove my loyalty to you. And he's like, I don't know what you are, but I like it. So we then cut over to a motel not too far away, or some sort of gas station where Carmen was seen. And we meet up with Elliot, who just looks like Sam Elliott. And Jared's like, oh, hey, man, it's been ages since we last met. And he's like, yeah, you haven't changed at all. And he's like, yeah, well, this is how it is with me. And he's like, no, but like, seriously, like, you're probably going to be around once we're in like space and have like space travel. He's like, well, you never know. I mean, it's only been like 20 years between us, right? And he's like, no, I was in my 20s. Like, I'm like 60 now. And she's like, oh, well, you still with Susie? And it's like, yeah, we kind of. She died, breast cancer. It was a whole thing, but whatever. So they just stare into the stars for a while. And then Jared's just like, okay, well, what do you got for me? And he's like, well, there's a spa out there. It's this whole affluent place. That was the last place she was seen. We got you a hookup, a fake identity. You're going to be staying there. Here's your info and details. You're going to be staying in a motel to study your role. And he's like, awesome, great. It was good catching up with you. So he takes the role. He finds out that he is a video game publisher who just divorced his wife and needs some alone time. And he's like, son of a bitch, I don't play video games. Last thing I played was Pong. When all of a sudden there's a frantic knocking at the door. He hides his paperwork under the mattress, and this woman busts in the room just saying, like, gotta hide, gotta hide, gotta hide. And she runs into the bathroom. And then two big burly guys show up outside the door saying, like, mister, it's in your best interest if you let us get to that woman. And he's like, whoa, hold on now. She seemed very upset, and you two men do not seem to be her father. So I'm going to have to ask you to let me talk to her, and then we can discuss what's happening here. And the guy just picks up Jared, throws him against the wall, puts his boot over his head, just being like, now, you're going to stay down while I go get that girl. And Jared's like, you just made a mistake, man. And he, while the boot's on his head, twists his ankle 180 degrees, causes him to fall over. The other guy pulls out a gun, shoots Jared in the chest. Of course, it does nothing. So Jared manages to knock the other guy out, take his gun. He goes to the girl in the bathroom being like, hey, it's okay. They're gone now. Everything's fine. And she's like, oh, I was out at the bar and they were hitting on me and I just didn't know where else to go. I was so scared. And he's like, it's okay. It's all right. Don't worry. No big deal. And as she's talking to Jared, who goes to the bathroom to wash up, she grabs the gun and just like, yeah, sorry, that was a lie. I always hated the acting bit. And she just blows a hole through his head and he falls down to the ground. And she's like, oh, sorry, hero. Life sucks like that sometimes. So we see this girl who's called Libby, maybe, she goes over to the one guy who had his ankle broken, just being like, hey, you still alive? And he's like, oh, yeah, please. And she's like, oh, well, you know the rules. Once you're in, there's only one way you're going to get out. And you tried to get out other way. And so she shoots him in the head. She calls up somebody saying like, hey, it's Libby. I caught the boys. I took care of them. Also a civilian had to die, but no big deal. I'll be cleaning up this place and then taking the bodies back for proper disposal. And as she leaves the room to go get her cleaning supplies, Jared's like, holy crap, this is perfect. She's going to take me straight to where this Utah the spa thing is. And so he goes to his paperwork, tears it up, flushes down the toilet. It's just like, oh yeah, she's going to be expecting some blood. And so she goes over to Gus, just starts splashing his blood all over his face and then lays back down on the ground. So Jared's now in a body bag in a van, and he's like, I can't see anything, but I can hear and feel the differences in the truck. We're on a paved road for a while, and then a dirt road, and then a paved road again. She stops. There are two men approaching the car. She gets out of the car as well, coming around to the back seat to open us up. Showtime. And that's where we leave off. I am constantly surprised by how much I actually engage with this book. Every time I go to pick it up, I'm like, oh, I don't remember what was happening. But then I read the first page, I'm like, oh yeah, everything's coming back to me now. And it's always fun. It's always a good, well-written story. The stuff with Jared, it's not realistic. That's the wrong word for it, but it's played in this more straight fashion, the humor, where like even the most outlandish moments, like this guy, a zombie literally eating this guy and then coming out just saying like, hey guys, how's it going? It's like, hey, you ordered takeout. Like, I don't know, there's something funny about that, and it just really works for me. So I'm down with this book. I really do enjoy it, and I'm looking forward to seeing how it is going to wrap itself up. It is a very short story. I think we've got like 3 issues left, but I'm down for it. So I'm going to say this is a... I'm going to say 8. It's right between a 7.5 and an 8 for me, and I'm just going to round it up because I think it is one of the stronger issues. I really like the way that it's dealing with stuff. Even like them just, the guys just roaming the woods and then just blowing a bunny up to smithereens and being like, was that thing even infected? Ah, well, whatever. Like, it's a funny moment. This is a funny book. I'm all in for that. Justice League Dark number 37, written by J.M. DeMatteis, art by Andre Guinaldo. So the last few issues have been dealing with the fact that the Justice League Dark has been scattered across time, dimensions, things. Zatanna stuck in the very, very early time. A lot of the crew is stuck in the distant past, and then we follow a third crew in this issue. But we open up with Zatanna as she is still in this distant past where magic is so much more powerful, and she's able to conjure spells like it's nothing, but she still can't make a way out of here. And after spending what may be eons, because time doesn't move at the beginning of time, she finds a tree that seems to be the center, the source of this world's magic. And she's like, all right, got to tap into that and figure out what's going on. But then we follow our crew for this issue, which is Black Orchid, Deadman, and Madame Xanadu. And they are stuck in shattered time? Big time bubble? Hard to say. We see them looking around, and there's just little fragments, little shatters of themselves just all over the place. And as they look around, it's like every second, every moment that they're here, it's splintering more and more, making more versions of themselves. And we see multiple versions of like Black Orchid, Xanadu, Deadman. They're each sprouting out through the walls, through like this glassy substance. And Xanadu uses her magic and blasts all of them away. And the whole narration is from her perspective of saying like, oh, this is insane. We'll go mad. I can't do anything to stop them. And then she comes to her senses and be like, no, I'm Xanadu. God damn it. I've done all this stuff. I'll manage the way out of this. So she casts some spells to like make nets around the real Black Orchid and Deadman. And she heads up to one of the walls and she touches it and concentrates. And then all of a sudden she manages to be on the outside of this. And Deadman and Black Orchid are like, what the hell happened? Xanadu, did you do that? And it's just like, yeah, totally. It's like a time loop, but it's like instantaneous and it keeps on feedback looping on itself. It's a whole thing. So they look around trying to figure out where Zatanna and everyone else is. And it's like, okay, well, better than that, let's try to figure out when we are, because Xanadu immediately recognizes that they moved from a place of inverted time to a place of no time at all. And we see this grand view of the skyline, which is made up of people that are extremely old, but also of in utero fetuses as well. And it's like they're like frozen in time. They've been drifting around forever. And we cut over to a man sitting on a throne. I think his name is Arif, the Lord of Now. And he's like, yes, they are the first and the last of our kind. They are always and never. This part of the universe is outside of time. Time does not exist here, but it is always now. And I'm going to try to not make a Spaceballs joke out of that, but for the most part, they arrive at this kingdom, and there are people here. There are people who are living in this kingdom, but Arif is the leader. He's the king, and he says this is a place of eternal twilight. There's no past or future. Everything is just always as it is now. And he's like, yes, it's a paradise. And he asks where they came from, and they try to explain the concept of time passing, and he's like, I don't get it. But regardless, you're welcome to stay here. But then Black Orchid looks through a telescope nearby up at this weird dark ribbon structure in the sky. And she's like, oh, what's that shadowy place up there? And he goes, oh, that's not part of my kingdom. That is the beyond beyond. It's stuff that touches it ceases to exist. You're not allowed to go there. It's forbidden. As long as you live here, you're not allowed to go there. So back in their rooms, Xanadu is like casting spells, ready to bust out of there. And something happens where the laws of magic don't apply here. So all of her spells start backfiring. They almost engulf her in flames. Deadman gets her out of the way at the last second. And she's like, I can't do anything to get us out of here. We're trapped. And Arif appears in the door and just being like, oh, well, you say it's a trap. I say it's paradise. Come and see for yourself. And Xanadu is immediately smitten because she says, I'm just now really meeting him, but it feels like I've always known him and will always know him because it's the now. So she's immediately like, oh, okay, and just like joins him out for a walk in the garden. Meanwhile, Deadman and Black Orchid are like, so you want to go check out that big death ribbon thing in the sky? And she's like, yeah, of course, let's go. So we see Xanadu walking through the garden. Arif picks a like golden apple off of this tree, hands it over to her. It's still on the tree after he picks it, and she's like, but how? Isn't that a paradox? And he's like, no, it always has been and always will be. It's there, but not there, and always there. So she eats the apple, and it feels like absolute peace washes over her, and she's like, oh man, it's been forever since I felt something like this. And we sit and we talk for a second, or maybe an eon. I don't know. It's one of the two. And she just talks about like her entire life, her history lived in time. And he's very interested in all this stuff. And they share moments that were never shared with anyone. And she's happy to open up to him because, again, it feels like good to her. It feels like this is something that has always been. But we see Orchid and Deadman flying their way up into the thing, and Orchid makes the point of saying, like, hey, I don't plan on spending eternity here because I don't even know who I am. My real name is Alba Garcia, and that's all I got. So I need to fill out something else. And as they're flying up there, they immediately stop by a guard named Macaria, who says, you're forbidden from going past this point. A Deadman, God bless the man, he always at least tries this. Jumps into Macaria's body and says, haha, I'll just control you. And then he gets immediately kicked out. And the reasoning this time is, turns out my powers are just as on the fritz as Xanadu's. So Black Orchid's the only one who's got powers. She shapeshifts into Macaria. They start doing a mirror match with giant axes when all of a sudden Deadman gets in the way being like, yo, everyone stop. And Macaria's like, oh, this is a trick, I swear to God. And he's like, does that look like a trick? And all of them freeze and gawk in terror as something is happening off panel. So we then cut over to Zatanna, still at the beginning of time, and she's meditating in front of the tree, trying to tap into it, and she just can't do it. But she does feel that something is going on. There's a rupture in the time stream that feels like a blood vessel about to burst, and then something happens, but we don't get to see what yet. So we go back to Xanadu and Arif is like, man, I envy you. You got to experience time. I'd really like to see the universe be able to change around me. And she's like, I mean, it's always entropy. Like, it always just ends in death and destruction. Like, it's nothing good. This place is always in its heyday, you know? And he's like, no. Look, there's still a little bit of time resonance within your person. Please allow me to taste of it. And she's like, all right, what could the smallest taste hurt? So they kiss, and she passes over a bit of time resonance, and we get a 9-panel grid of Arif. Like this, the tree is going through the seasons of like wilting, growing, and then Arif, we see him just age in accelerated time, where he just like shrivels into an old man instantly and falls down and dies. And Xanadu tries to pull back the time residue, and he's like, no, it's fine. I'm old and gray, and that was great. I'm really glad that I got to experience that, and I'm happy that I found. And he dies. And Xanadu's like, oh my God, I can't believe it. Am I an angel who granted him his last piece, or am I the serpent in the garden that was tempting him? But then she looks up in the sky to see the same thing that Deadman and Black Orchid was seeing. And it turns out that Black Ribbon has now engulfed into a giant-ass wave of darkness that literally has 2 eyes that look very pissed off on it. So she says, oh, what in the name of God I've unleashed by bringing time into this timeless place. And then our last thing we get as darkness washes over them is, I can't tell if it's Zatanna or Xanadu, but someone's wrapped up inside of the tree. Like, it ain't good. So Yeah, all right. So compared to the last two issues, the first issue was absolutely fantastic. Like, it really did a great job of saying Zatanna's like hopelessness in this place where she's basically constructed the whole world. Loved it. Second one, following Frankenstein and a bunch of other members there, also great. Really did a good job of selling like the end of the world and sailing off into nothingness. Loved that. This one I feel is the weak link. This one didn't feel like it quite had the metaphor worked out as well. Like this place where time never moves. They sometimes played with it of this idea of like, oh, a second or an eon. Like it always feels the same. But so did the beginning of time and so did the end of time. Like I wanted there to be something special about this place. I don't know how better to explain it. Like the moment where the apple gets pulled from the tree, I feel is the best thing, where nothing should ever be able to change, period, about this place. And it shouldn't so much as be that nobody can experience new things. It should be that like nobody can learn anything either. The same moments are like kind of repeating. You can be in different spots, but like nothing is truly ever growing at all. No knowledge is ever being added. No experiences are ever being had. I think that would be the better way to explore that. But, they did what they could with the book. So all in all, I think this is going to be I'll just give this one a flat 7. I am still looking forward to seeing how we wrap it up, assuming that is the next issue. But who knows, we might have a few more dealing with the rest of this storyline. So 7 for this. We'll see what comes next. Batman Eternal number 38, written by Snyder, Tynion, Fawkes, Higgins, and Seeley, art by Andrea Mutti. So last issue was this is kind of just a two-parter thing, where last issue set up this whole thing with the Arkham escapees planning a whole thing, and then Catwoman also tangentially being involved. This one just wraps it all up. So we open up with the Willowwood Home for Children, and it's an old abandoned like children's foster home or something like that. Batman got the hint that the Arkham escapees were in here, but now that they're low on tech, it's going to be a whole thing to try to bust in. So we see our inmates are all just scattered around this place, bored and waiting for a contact that Poison Ivy has, a businessman who's going to be able to get them the stuff that they need. Scarecrow has taken 3 hostages, just because why not? Sure, they're dressed up as crows, and they're all just chilling out here waiting. And Scarecrow goes through this whole long psychological breakdown of like, here's all the reasons why all the people here would be super upset over the fact that they are stuck here, and they're going to be ruminating over their childhoods and stuff in this place that's so creepy and rundown. And then we go to Blackgate, where we see Calabrese the lion, who is Jim Gordon's roommate's getting a massage from one of the other inmates, and Jim wakes up to it and he's just like, man, do you gotta, like, seriously? And Lion's just like, hey, look, I know you've had some problems with me ever since I revealed my true identity and whatnot, but I don't think it's because I'm, the me that I am. I think it's because I'm not doing my self-imposed exile thing that I was doing before, that I'm taking advantage of my clout a little bit here. But here's the thing. I could use that clout to help get you out of here. Like, you're an innocent man now. Everyone knows it. It's the system that isn't working for you. Let me help you out here, Jim. And Gordon's just like, nope, I trust the system and I believe in Gotham and I'm going to do this the right way. So we see the Batman's already launched his plan into action to take out these guys. He chloroforms Joker's daughter, ties her up. Some satellite tracking shows that there's a cold spot on the south side of the building, so that's Mr. Freeze. And we follow Poison Ivy and Bane as they are underneath the place. They hear Batman stomping around upstairs. So it's like, oh, he's already here. Well, we'll let the other inmates slow him down a bit, and then Bane, you can take care of him. And Bane's like, yes, that's a good plan, Poison Ivy. In fact, it's a great plan. I'm going to marry you one day, and I'm going to perform a rendition of... And Bane, like, snaps to it for a second. He's like, crap, you drugged me, didn't you? When did you do that? And he's like, oh, in the last issue, when you were eating that non-rotten fruit, that was my fruit. I made that, and I laced it with my own special additives. And Bane's like, I'm going to kill you now. You understand that, right? And she's like, no, you won't. That venom has made you... This is very susceptible to my toxins. So Bane asks why, and she's like, oh, I only care about green things, and this is survival of the fittest. And she walks off, leaving Bane to deal with Killer Croc down here in the sewers. And Croc launches in, and these two have a history because of what happened in Forever Evil Arkham War, where Bane just straight up curb stomped Killer Croc. And he's like, oh, you want to come back for seconds? I'll do it again. And Croc's like, but last time we were up in your world. Now we're in mine. And he breaks like a sewer pipe, blasts some gas over in Bane's face. And he's like, oh, you call this your domain? I was born in a prison, molded by it. I didn't see you, all that shtick. And he literally says, like, I would have loved to be in a sewer. This place is great compared to the prison, but no matter where we're at, Bane wins. And he lifts Croc over his head and he'd be like, you know what? I'm going to snap your back anyway. It's going to sound nice. I like the sound of it. But it turns out this is all part of Croc's plan, because as Bane lifts him up, Croc's head gets dangerously close to the venom pumps in the back of his head, and Croc bites through one of them. So we then cut over to see Batman is taking out Mr. Freeze. He's talking to Julia on the comms saying, hey, you got to move the glider in this very specific spot, otherwise this isn't going to work. And she's like, I know, I've been flying drones forever, I know how to handle this. So they fly this hover thing in, which allows them to attack Clayface and Scarecrow at the same time, freeze the hostages via this hover thing. But turns out that there was a fourth hostage. Scarecrow's got the fourth hostage by the neck, being like, hey, you let me walk out of here, I'm gonna cut this kid's intestines out. And Batman fires off 2 tranq darts into the kid. Turns out it was Clayface just pretending the whole time. And we then cut back over to Bane. And Bane's like, Croc, I can fight without venom. I'm still Bane. Why does everyone always think that that's enough to take me out? And Croc bites into Bane's arm, starts making him bleed profusely. He slashes Bane's leg, keeps on going at it. And he's like, oh, yeah, I know. I know that you can fight without the venom, but the venom is like in your blood. That's the reason you're able to keep fighting. But it does eventually burn its way out, especially the more you have to use it. So I thought, well, if Bane's still got venom in his blood, what happens if I take away Bane's blood? And Bane is just collapsed down. He's like, all right, go ahead and kill me. And Croc's like, oh, I'm not going to kill you. This is just making an example of you. So we see Batman knocks out Scarecrow, and Scarecrow, it just drives the knife a little deeper into Batman. He's like, oh, you don't even know all this stuff going on, the train tracks and all this other stuff. It's too big. You don't even see it from how low down you are. You can't solve the riddle. You can't see the writing on the wall. And Batman once again just headbutts Scarecrow, knocks him out. And Julia's like, I think he was talking about Riddler. And Batman's like, yeah, of course he was talking about, at least look, put a pin in it. I still got to go deal with Bane and Poison Ivy. So they go down to the sewers underneath, and Batman's like, don't worry, Bane is not an egomaniac. He's not going to run from a fight. I'm sure I'll run into him down here. But as he goes down, he sees Bane is tied up, like by his hands in the sewage pipes, and on the walls is written, Leroy est mort, vive Leroy, which that was an offhand comment to what Croc said earlier. He's like, oh, you guys underestimate me. I read French literature, I like French literature. So we see what happened to Poison Ivy is that she manages to make her way outside of the sewer system. She meets up with Catwoman, and Catwoman says, here's your bunch of money. Thank you for delivering Bane as necessary, and I hope we're good. And Poison Ivy gives Catwoman a kiss on the cheek and just says, oh yeah, us girls have to stick together. And she leaves, and Catwoman turns to her second in command and is like, wipe this off me and do not touch it, please. So Catwoman goes in front of the heads of a bunch of families and says, all right, here's the thing. I'm opening the meeting of the first families with some good news. A bunch of the Arkhamites have been taken out by Batman. We're going to take the city back from the freaks. So we then cut over to Jason Bard, who is in Blackgate. And it doesn't say he's in Blackgate to start, but he says, look, I did it. I took out the Batman, but it caused the city to go into a war zone, and now none of the cops trust me. And I need some people on my side, Harvey, Maggie, anyone to be on my side, because I can get this all back to good, but it's going to require some dark and dirty stuff, man. And I need your help to help me get them back. And we see that he's talking to Jim Gordon, and Jim's like, I'm glad you came here and told me the truth, but you need to do things by the book, and you need to get me the hell out of here, man. So, final page we get is just a rehash of one of the opening pages of the last issue, which is Catwoman at the Egyptian club, and she's like trying to relax. She's laying down. She's like, oh yeah, I think the first families realized I finally mean business, and that I'm able to really deliver on promises here. And we see that Catwoman has recruited Killer Croc as some level of security here at the Egyptian club. He's decked out as like a pharaoh, and he's like, oh, whatever you say, Cat, I mean my queen. And she's like, perfect. Not with P-U-R-R, but you get the point. Yeah, that's the issue. Art's a little bit shaky. I don't like how Scarecrow was done in this, but the rest of it's more or less fine. Beyond that, I get where this is coming from. It's just a little side story just to say, okay, here's what Selina's doing at the thing. But compared to all the stuff we were setting up before with, like, the nanites going on and all this other stuff of, like, the ghosts with Luke Fawkes even last issue, this entire storyline of, and this is how the Arkhamites got caught, just kind of feels superfluous in a way, especially when we already established the Riddler stuff like right before this. And then Scarecrow has to come in and say, by the way, check out Riddler. Like, I don't know, it feels like a needless diversion. I'm not saying that it would have been better for them to stretch out whatever they actually have planned an extra 2 issues. It probably wouldn't have been, but I think that needs to come into account when you're planning out the story, Beyond that, it's not horrible. I would still give it I'd say a 7. And I think most of that is Killer Croc just kind of delivering on being a good character. But the actual story itself is just kind of for me. So yeah, 7 for this. Future's End number 34, written by Azzarello, Lemire, Jurgens, and Giffen, art by Patrick Zurcher and Scott Collins. So this issue opens up with Dr. Polaris, who is Dr. Yamazaki with superpowers, just basically yelling out to Firestorm, being like, you thought I was dead, but no, I've become one with the magnetic field, therefore I am super powerful, and you probably think I should be thanking you, but no, and he blasts Firestorm with a big metal ball. And Jason's inside saying, like, Madison, I get that you're new to this, but you're going to have to fight. And she's like, what? No, I've never even been in a fight. And then she gets blasted back into a wall. Jason's like, turn the bricks into something. All right, too late. Whatever. You hit it pretty hard. So she's telling him, like, get up. Seriously, this is dangerous. You got to get out of here. This dude hates us specifically. We got to go. So as a giant metal fist is about to ball down on her, Jason says, you got to dodge. So she dodges out of the way. She says she doesn't know what to do in a fight. And she's like, well, we're just going to have to learn on the fly. So she flies up in the sky and she's like, look, you're asking like a kindergartner to go in the ring with a heavyweight champ. And he's like, I get it. We don't have a choice. Look, you do have the ability to like fire blast. Try doing that. Aim a fire blast at him. And she's like, okay. And so she blasts and it just dodges around. And he's like, oh, a female Firestorm. I never knew about you. No wonder the Justice League is hiding so many secrets. Such a surprise. And Jason's like, you missed him. And she's like, yeah, sorry, I missed. What do you expect? Jesus Christ. So at that point, Polaris throws a cement truck at her. And he's like, okay, you got to picture something soft. You can transform the atomic weight. Just do it. And she's like, oh, okay, soft. And she pictures something soft. But then he's like, no, you still have to dodge because it still is the same mass. And she transforms it into a giant teddy bear, which hits her with the mass of a cement truck, and she gets knocked down to the ground and is like, all right, that's still going to hurt. And Polaris is looking on like, are you sure you're in the Justice League? Are you positive about that? So we then go back to the Stormwatch crew, specifically the Atom, who is inside the head of Father Time and comes across the alien parasite that is actually Father Time. And the parasite's just like, you should consider yourself lucky. No one's ever seen my true face. I've been doing this for 200 years, and I'm not going to let you stop me now. And the Atom's just like, why would you do this? You're not a murderer. Why is the engineer so important that you kill us? And he's just like, Brainiac is coming. Brainiac took control of Engineer. Brainiac is a threat. Engineer is a threat. Do you understand the train of logic here? And he's like, no, she's our friend. She's a human being. You're not going to be able to take her out. And he's like, are you kidding me? Atom, you are locked up in your office all the time. You are borderline crazy. You don't have any friends. So back out on the battlefield, we see Father Time starts like morphing and like changing from the like 12-ish year old looking girl to an old looking man. And just they have no idea what's going on. But Frankenstein points out, oh, if Adam is inside, then whatever he's doing, it's changing him between forms, this regeneration process, changing back to an old form. So Adam pulls out a gun, and Father Time's like, seriously, a gun? What do you think it's going to do? He's like, oh, this isn't any gun. This is my shrink ray. And he zaps down Father Time, shrinking it small enough to be handheld size. There we go. And as the morphing starts to get like absolutely horrific and just like Cronenbergian, it's like, okay, maybe we should kill this thing because it's getting bad. But then Adam just explodes out of this pile of goo holding the parasite, just being like, you think that's gross, check out this thing. So they hold Father Time at arm's length, and Father Time makes a plea over to Frankenstein like, Frank, you gotta help me, man. This is Brainiac's coming. It's the only way, for like old times, right? You and me, just like always. And we see one of the shade agents aims a gun as Frankenstein's just like, no, we're doing things differently this time. If Brainiac shows up, then I'm going to do it with my new friends. And Frankenstein gets shot in the back by this shade agent. Hawkman takes out the agent, but Amethyst points out, because of the nth metal healing sort of stuff, Frankenstein is actually dying from this. So then we cut over to Nevada, and we deal with the voodoo plot. And I say we deal with very literally here. So all the girls who have been brought in to taking out 50 Sue, they're now sitting around and complaining that not only are they not taking out 50 Sue, but they're going to be working with her. And not only are they working with her not to do anything about Brother Eye or anything else going on, they're working with her to salvage a vault from the bottom of the sea that holds the DNA of all the superheroes. And one of them even points out, do you like remember the fact that we were supposed to kill her a few issues ago, and then we just all of a sudden got these new orders here? And Justin, Grifter's guy, comes in and says, hey, I was kicked out of the room. Sequel said I should come here. And they're like, who the hell is Sequel? And it's like, oh, the little girl. And it's like 50 Sue. And he's like, I don't know who 50 Sue is. She said her name is Sequel. So at that point, he lets slip that, oh yeah, she dragged me out to fetch Cole and some redhead from her too. To which Voodoo jumps up being like, Cole's alive? Are you serious? Where is he? And it's like, oh, it was with Faraday and some creepy guy with a bad eye. So we go up to the room where Faraday and Sergeant Rock is. They also have that other guy, Boyer, the one who did the experiments on Rampage earlier. He's now in on this as well. And they still haven't really established 50 Sue's motivation here. She says she's dressed as Deathstroke in order to take on his obligations, but then Cole immediately brings up the idea of like, however he betrayed you, and she's like, shut up. So at that point, Faraday starts chewing out Lana, saying like, I don't even know why you're here. You're not really all that remarkable. And then Cole's like, look, can we just focus on the fact that you want us to go and deep dive to a DNA vault on the bottom of the ocean floor and bring it back to you? And he's like, yes, it should be easy enough to bring up. Like, it's just sitting there on the bottom. It's unique to cabinets. And it's like, and it's buried under a bunch of hundreds of thousands of tons of rubble. And it's like, yeah, we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. And then Boyer chimes in, and it's like, why doesn't 50 Sue just zap it up? She's been zapping stuff around constantly. This doesn't make any sense. To which 50 Sue gets pissed off and melts his hand off and then knocks him unconscious so he doesn't cry about it. And Lana gets so upset about this, she runs out of the room, like, horrified. To which Lana's like, what did I do? 50 Sue's like, what did I do? And they're all just like, look, she still sees you as a little girl. And when you do horrifying things like that, it kind of sets her off. And that upsets 50 Sue for some reason. So then we get over with Terry McGinnis, and he's talking to Alfred, and Alfred's like, oh, I've detected an anomaly. It's possibly Brother Eye. It's located at Terrifitech. It was just a pulse, but it was unmistakable. And we see very slowly Alfred starts getting corrupted. He starts getting knocked out a little bit, and he's like, oh, Brother Eye is AI, but... And Terry's like, what is going on? Alfred, what's happening? And we see Batman, real Batman, is on a roof listening in to Terry with his own little device. And Alfred's like, oh, you are in danger. I'm shutting down. And Terry's like, Alfred, what's going on? And then we cut to the future, 35 years from now, where Brother Eye has designed the Batman-Joker hybrid, and he's like, all right, I'm about to send you into the past, and you will go back and you will destroy the agent that you sent back to destroy me. And Batman's like, no, I won't do it. And his head flips around and goes to Joker. He's like, I'll do it. So at that point, Brother Eye's like, hey, don't resist. This is exactly who you are now. And Mr. Terrific chimes in and says, like, Bruce, never forget who you are. And Bruce is just looking at Mr. Terrific like, look at me. Who the hell do you think I am? What am I? So he gets zapped to the past, and Brother Eye's like, oh, he will go back and he will correct the past. And Mr. Terrific's like, what makes you so sure? And we see Plastique in the past, 5 years in our future, walking through the subway when all of a sudden something zaps in front of her. It's Batman/Joker, and Brother Eye says, oh, simply put, I still exist. So, yeah, all right. The first plot, good. The Stormwatch plot, good. The Voodoo, Coal Cash, Faraday plot, do something. For God's sakes. You literally, in this issue, point out how you established that Voodoo and her entire team was put together to go and deal with and kill 50 Sue. And then you did nothing with them until you got to the point where now they have to work with her. Like, do something. Stop dicking around with this plot. Just like, and you're now throwing back that now there is a Batman-Joker hybrid from 30 years in the future that's going back to 5 years in the future and is now running around Terminator style. And you expect me to give a damn about whatever DNA vault is on the bottom? Like, I hate that plot so much. It's really done nothing for me this entire time. We are 30 plus issues into this and it has done nothing. Anyway, all the rest of the stuff is okay. I like, Terry's lost Alfred now, so he's a bit more lost. Batman is now more involved. I like to see where that's going to go, if anywhere. That middle bit just pissed me off so much because it's so much of nothing. All in all, I'm going to give this one a 6. It's still technically above a 5, but like, if it keeps this up, if we focus too much on like nothing happening, I'm just going to get more pissed off as we keep going. Earth 2 World's End number 12, written by Wilson, Bennett, and Johnson, art by etc. So, this issue opens up with Darkseid, who has recently been re-alived, and he is approaching the throne room as everyone's kneeling before him. And he goes and sits in his throne, and he's like, all right, give me the update. How's the planet going? And they're like, oh, we just crashed into their moon. It's totally decimating their planet. The hornblower has spoken. The cycle's ready to repeat. Everything's going good. And Darkseid says, oh, and what about the newest member of our court? How is she doing? Where is my army, Barda? And Barda steps in saying, like, everything's going super swell. Many of their champions have fallen. We've converted other ones. Even now, my Furies wreak destruction all over the planet. And we cut down to one of those Furies, who is Helena, who has since been changed over by Desaad. She's going up against Kara, and Kara's just like, hey, man, I don't want to fight you. I know you're still in there, Helena. And Helena's like, no, I'm not. I'm not in here anymore. And she whips it, Kara, and she's like, oh, Helena, you got to remember, we came in here to take Desaad and save the Earth from apocalypse. And she just keeps on whipping at Kara, and she's like, you wouldn't hurt me. You couldn't hurt me. And it seems like for just a second, she reaches through to Helena. She gives around a big hug. And as she's saying, like, Ka, all of a sudden, she slashes Power Girl and runs up a bunch of stairs, flies off, saying, like, oh, Huntress, the Fury of the Four Sisters, will go and join my sisters. So at that point, Kara looks down just like, oh, we didn't come back here just to lose you again, but I'm not going to lose anyone again. So she runs in where Batman, Superman, Val-Zod all are, and Val-Zod's like, hey, did you stop her? And she's like, no, she got away. By the way, what is this place? And Superman's like, oh, this is the machine. It was used to clone me, but they took too many samples. It poisoned me, so I'm no longer viable to make real clones. All their clones just fail immediately. But we need to get going because it was way too easy to get in here. And then Desaad comes out of the shadows being like, damn right it was. Hey, everybody, it's me, Desaad. So then we're back on Apocalypse. Mr. Miracle, Sandman, Mr. Terrific, and Fury are all coming out of a boom tube back near the ship, and there's like, okay, look, we need to talk about what happened here. And Terrific's like, yeah, we need to. What? Everything has gone to crap. This mission is totally thing. You freed Darkseid from his prison when you said you'd be able to kill him. What happened? And Fury encourages Mr. Miracle to talk, and he's just like, Barda betrayed me. She betrayed us all. She made me a fool. I freed him because of what she goaded me into. And Fury's like, hey, it's not your fault. We were both blinded. We were both manipulated. And Miracle's just like, how can I trust you anymore? How can I trust anyone? And she's just like, because I was also betrayed. Can we at least like bond over that at the very least? Together we can set things right. And Mr. Miracle's like, oh, this is not the time for vengeance. Vengeance is just another weakness. This is time for retribution. So we go back down to Chicago. Dick Grayson, he was never a fighter, but ever since he lost his wife and his kid was taken away on a train, he's throwing punches, specifically against the guy who killed his wife. And he's like, part of me wants to just let this guy finish the job, join Barbara in the sweet, sweet afterlife, but another part of me remembers my son, and he picks up a baseball bat, and he remembers how his son always wanted to see his dad hit the ball super hard and super far. So he wails into the sky super hard over and over again until the guy is seemingly dead and Dick is covered in his blood. However, all the other people are freaking out because, if you remember, Chicago's about to get hit by a tidal wave, and everyone else starts running, and he's like, you know what? Yeah, I'm all right with this. I avenged or whatnot. Let this nightmare be washed away, as he looks and sees a giant tidal wave coming over the city skyline. So then we go over to Commander Khan, who's talking with Terry Sloan, and Khan's like, hey, Terry, why has the ship not been attacked yet? And also, where were you for the past hour? And Terry's like, it's because the ship has camouflaged, and I was outside making sure that the ship's camouflage was okay. And Khan's like, that makes sense, but I just don't really believe you. And Terry's like, all right, what do you want to say? What's up? What's going on? And Khan just rips off a panel. He's like, there's a bomb in this ship, and you, and he rips open Terry's shirt, are wearing a flight suit. And so Terry's like, you don't get it, man. You can't beat Apocalypse. We're all going to die here. You should have listened to me earlier. So Khan tells everyone else to get off the ship as he punches Terry in the face enough to dislodge a few teeth. So then we go over to Amazonia, where Sato is running the world army, and she's just getting glimpses all around the world of like, well, Chicago's hit by a tidal wave. Everywhere else is being hit by meteors. I really do not have another way to go here. So in order to save as many people as we can, I am opening up the subsurface tunnels in order to transport everyone down there, and we can hopefully save at least a few. So she opens it up. People start getting loaded down into the underground. Flash is directing a bunch of people down there as Sato's like, hey, I need you to scout ahead in the tunnels, make sure they're safe, because we haven't been down there for a while. And he goes like 30 feet down a tunnel before, oops, bunch of killer robots. And she's like, I need you to deal with them, Flash. I got some other stuff I need to take care of here. So she exits out of the surveillance room, goes into the medical bay, and in there is Sergeant Al Pratt, a.k.a. the Atom, who... he's lost his arm to Superman. He's been in ICU ever since, but he's got to be woken up now because we need more wonders. And then finally, the last thing we get is the different avatars of the gray, green, white, and blue are all fighting against the three Furies that are there. And in comes the fourth Fury, Helena Wayne, who comes in and says, praise Almighty Darkseid, as she joins the fight. So, yeah, that's the issue. It's not a bad issue. I was a little bit more hopeful for what it would be based off the reveal of last time, where Terry Sloan was just selling out the Earth and saying how Highfather was like, yeah, no, go for it. As long as you do. This is the only Earth you attack. Eat this one up. Earth 2 sucks. That didn't really come up again here. And I'm sure it will at some point. I'm just a little bit disappointed that we kind of just went back to the previous storylines instead of making that the big pivot point where like everything you know about how this works now changes. Beyond that, I mean, it's not a bad issue. I think it's just expectations wise, And on top of that, the Helena stuff is a little bit, I don't want to say iffy, but just feels like it's stretched thin. You know, they had this bit where Helena and Kara fight for like 4 pages, and ultimately it's just, and then she runs away. And then we get 2 pages of this Avatar versus Fury's fight, and then she shows up at the end. It just feels like they're going to stretch this part out as long as they can. But the other stuff I'm down with, especially the Commander Khan finally landing a punch thing. That feels pretty good. So I'm going to go with I'll go with a 6.5 on this one. It's okay, not great, still just threading the needle here. And that's it. Kind of. That is almost all the comics that DC put out this December 24th, 2014. But like I said at the beginning, technically not. I pushed a bunch of the comics into next week, and we will be taking a look at all of those right now. So, coming up next week, which was still technically this week, for again, most of them, it's so confusing, we have a bunch of annuals. So we have Batman Annual number 3, Catwoman Annual number 2, Grayson Annual number 1, Green Lantern Annual number 3, and Red Hood and the Outlaws Annual number 2. I think the Green Lantern one is the finale to the Godhead storyline, so definitely check that out if you've been following that. We also have the finale to the Robin Rises storyline in Robin Rises Alpha number 1. That will be coming out there. And then we have 3 normal issues coming out in terms of Harley Quinn, Sinestro, and Superman Wonder Woman. Sinestro, of course, still being part of that Godhead storyline. And then finally, we have the weeklies, the 3 books that were actually the only books that came out next week officially. And those were Batman Eternal, Earth 2 World's End, and Future's End. Got all that? I will not be repeating it. So, all in all, everything's said and done. I hope that you and yours have a very Merry Christmas. I hope that you find some happiness and warm and joy stuff and things. Look, I'm not good at the sentimentality stuff. It's why I sit here alone without a co-host. I'm much more focused on barely stringing together a sentence enough to end this show. It takes all of my mental energy to do so, week after week, month after month, for years. I am a broken man inside. Happy holidays. So yeah, that's going to do it for me. If you have any comments on any of the comics that I talked about this week, last week, any week at all, or if you just want to send me a holiday cheer, comments are down beneath the video on the YouTube version, or you can hit me up in one of the multiple places that we have social media, like a Discord, or a Patreon, or a subreddit, or a Blue Sky. New Year's resolution, I'll get Blue Sky figured out. I promise. I'm really trying. Beyond that, thank you very much for watching, listening, however you consume this podcast. Be sure to give it a thumbs up, thumbs sideways, whatever the hell you got to do to tell yourself that you made an impact on this. And always try to remember, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.